Crimson skies bathed the empire's palaces and domes as the sun set. Inside the grand halls of the kingdom, the man receives word, very good. The Cladonais has secured the northern border. The king, seated on his gilded throne, praises him with a measured smile. But his praise is only the prelude. His sharp gaze turns to the young commander. "Tell me, how old are you now?" The reply comes with firm respect. 24, Your Majesty." The king leans back, satisfaction glinting in his eyes. "A fine age for marriage. Then, I shall grant you a bride from my royal bloodline." The court stirs in shock. Whispers echo against the tall pillars. A princess? The hidden one? Wasn't she long thought dead? Then, as if to confirm the rumors, the grand doors creak open. A young woman steps forward, barefoot, fragile, clad in a plain white dress. Her golden hair cascades down in waves, and her piercing blue eyes flicker with fear and hesitation. Gasps fill the hall. The courtiers murmur, astonished. "It's Princess Misa. She lives." Her steps faltered. She could barely stand under the weight of all the stairs. Her brother, seated high upon the throne, beckoned. "Misa, come here." She staggered forward, clutching at her chest, breath uneven. Fear overtook her body, her knees buckled, and she collapsed with a soft gasp, her golden hair spilling across the cold marble floor. The court held its breath. The princess? Is she even able to walk? Without hesitation, Eric stepped forward, kneeling beside her. Carefully, he took her hand and pressed his lips against it, sealing his vow in front of all. "It is my honor to serve you, princess." But Miasa yanked his hand. Her heart pounded violently. Her wide blue eyes trembled, confusion and fear flashing within them. "Miasa," the king's cold voice rang out, echoing through the chamber. "That is no way to greet your husband. Come here." He drew his sister close, clutching her as though she were both a prized possession and a pawn. "The one I cherish more than anyone, yet she lacks manners. Come now, offer your apologies." The young girl's lips parted, her breath uneven. Her voice broke into fragments, barely a whisper. Eric's gaze hardened. He said nothing, but his eyes followed every cruel gesture, quietly witnessing the merciless scene unfolding before him. The sun dipped behind the horizon as the carriage wheels rattled steadily over the dirt road. Inside sat stern faces, the Margrave and his wife, their silence sharper than any sword. It had been a long war, but the banners of triumph fluttered, and songs of victory echoed through the land. The Cladonais knights, ironclad and unyielding, had carved their legend into the battlefield, securing the empire's glory. For while the people praised Cladonais' valor, the king, seated high upon his throne, was far from pleased. Power unsettled him. The growing influence of one house made his crown feel heavier. And so, with cold calculation, he devised a binding chain disguised as a gift. A marriage. That very night, at a grand hall, voices rose in anger. Fists struck tables. "Is this all? After everything we sacrificed? A foolish princess is our prize?" But amid the outrage, one voice cut through the storm. Calm, composed, and resolute. "We cannot refuse the king's command." Eric Cladonais, the young lord, spoke with steady eyes. "The wedding is inevitable," he continued, a shadow crossing his gaze. "Even if the marriage is unwanted." Lifting his knife, he sliced through his meal with the same precision he carried on the battlefield. His conviction was clear. Personal feelings mattered little in the face of duty. At the other end of the table, his cousin Amberic finally broke the silence, his voice tense. "What about the engagement to the Crispin family?" But the answer was already known, and another voice snapped in response. "Do you even have to ask?" Eric himself, bound by duty, wore his mask of calm. To him, the marriage was no union of love, but a battlefield of politics, one he could not refuse. The days blurred, the tension thickening, until finally, the wedding day dawned. The capital came alive, streets buzzing with gossip and curiosity. Citizens flocked to see the princess who was to wed the hero of Cladonais. Inside the grand carriage, the groom sat tall in his regal attire, his expression calm yet shadowed with thought. Draped in white and gold, he looked every bit the part of a fairy tale prince. The groom stepped forward, his boots striking the marble floor with measured grace. Then the great wooden doors creaked open. A hush fell. All eyes turned as the bride appeared at last. The princess, radiant in her flowing gown of white lace, entered the hall. She looked ethereal, like a figure sculpted of moonlight. But soon, murmurs broke the silence. "Good heavens, is she unwell? She looks as if she's drunk. She can barely walk." The sacred hall fell silent as the vows were spoken. The priest's voice echoed, steady and solemn, binding two fates together. The words rang heavy, final, like iron chains disguised as holy blessings. "You may now kiss the bride." Eric leaned down, his gloved hand gently cupping Miasa's trembling face. Their lips met, a seal, a spectacle, a kiss that would fool the world. Applause filled the cathedral, muffling the silent despair in Miasa's eyes. Night descended. The palace shimmered under the stars. Inside, attendants bowed deeply. "You must be cautious not to hurt the princess." We will come by tomorrow morning to collect the evidence that proves you have fulfilled your marital duties, my lord. Understood, Eric's voice cut through the chamber. The heavy doors creaked open. Step by deliberate step, he entered. Inside the chamber, Miasa lay bound and weakened, her wrists tied, her body trembling. Sedatives had been forced upon her, enough to still even a beast of burden. Eric's sharp eyes took in every detail. The shallow breaths, the unnaturally pale skin, the cruel restraints. His jaw tightened. Even prisoners of war are treated with more dignity than this. He knew instantly, this was not the work of petty malice. Only the king himself could have sanctioned something so merciless. Stepping closer, he crouched by her side. Her body was ice cold, temperature frighteningly low. He freed her wrists, gently massaging warmth back into them. But it wasn't enough. Desperation pressed upon him. There was only one way left. Princess, he murmured, voice low, steadying himself for what must be done. I will share my warmth with you. Please don't be surprised. He slipped beneath the blanket, pulling her frail frame against his chest. Then, as if formally introducing himself for the first time, he spoke with quiet solemnity. My name is Eric, son of the Cladonnet family. I am 24 years old and have no brothers. I once had a younger sister, but I lost her in an accident when I was young. His voice grew heavier. Since then, I've been living on the war front, and yet, the princess is the one who held a wedding ceremony with me today. He looked at her, so pale, bound by cruel fate and sedatives. Doubt flickered in his eyes. Does she even understand any of this? Still, he knew one thing, she deserved to know. Winter in the border is brutal, he muttered. His hands gently reached for hers, icy to the touch. Frostbite begins at the ends of the body. It's more important than anything to get the blood flowing again. The princess stirred faintly, a soft sound escaping her lips, and her pale cheek showed a hint of returning color. Relief washed through him. Good. She's feeling better. Her complexion is returning. Yet another concern pressed on his mind. Proof of the first night was required. Without it, suspicions would rise. He stood, scanning the room for what he needed. His eyes fell on the delicate glass vessels, an idea forming. He sighed quietly, the weight of duty evident. By morning, dressed in simple garments, he stepped out, carrying the stained cloth, symbol of a consummated marriage. With a calm but commanding tone, he handed it to the waiting maids. It is proof of holy marriage, he said. The women bowed respectfully, promising to deliver it to the king. As they prepared to attend to the princess, Eric halted them. Wait, the princess hasn't woken yet. Please do it later. The maids exchanged glances but nodded. We understand. We'll let her rest then. Inside, Eric leaned against the door, exhaling deeply. Later, faint sounds caught his attention. He turned and found the princess sitting on the floor, her golden hair spilling over her shoulders, chewing absently on the corner of her blanket. Eric's brows furrowed. Princess, that is not for eating. But she ignored him, continuing her strange nibbling. Amused yet worried, he retrieved bread from the basket. Kneeling before her, he held it out. Seems you're hungry. Please wait a moment. How about this? The princess blinked, then reached hesitantly. As soon as the warm loaf touched her lips, she nibbled eagerly, her eyes softening as though tasting food for the first time. Eric couldn't help but smile faintly. I'm glad you like it. Later, the palace gates creaked open to welcome them back. Word spread swiftly, Master Eric has returned. But this time, he was not alone. By his side was the princess. At the sight, the household gathered. Nobles and servants alike exchanged glances, yet beneath the polite acceptance. The master of the house clenched his hands behind his back. Moments later, chaos unfurled. The princess, as though moved by some untamed impulse, climbed onto a great stone statue in the gardens, her attendants panicking below. Princess! That's dangerous! Please, come down! They cried, their voices sharp with fear. Margrave's jaw tightened as Eric strode forward, lifting her down with firm, steady arms. Please give the princess to me, one of the attendants begged. You should rest, master. I'm fine, he replied firmly. His voice allowed no room for argument. The princess has become a member of our family today. Since she is under my care, take caution when tending to her. The butler bowed deeply. Understood. We will take care of her, don't worry. Evening descended, and the family gathered at the long dining table. Eric's voice broke the stillness. He addressed the attendants hovering nearby. I'll take care of her during the meal. You may go back to rest. The servants exchanged knowing glances. One of the older women spoke, but the princess has a lot of difficulties, especially when eating, my lord. Slowly, Eric guided a dish toward her. My lady, he said softly, almost coaxing, would you like to eat this? For a moment, she simply blinked at him. Then, haltingly, she opened her mouth. But before he could sigh in relief, she spat the food back out. Shock rippled across the table. Gasps erupted, whispers buzzing like angry bees. The atmosphere shattered. Eric immediately caught her hands, restraining her. Please calm down, my lady, he murmured. Behind her, the princess's personal maids laughed softly, a mocking glint in their eyes. Prepare to clean up the lady, Eric commanded. The maids exchanged glances, then stepped forward with rehearsed obedience. Understood, they replied, their tone laced with quiet disdain. Long ago, in the kingdom of Esquilor, there were 3 houses that were called the 3 pillars of the kingdom. The house of Selekeze, which kept the kingdom's internal affairs stable. The house of Crispin, which kept the kingdom's public order and security. And the house of Cladini, which protected the kingdom from external threats. Each of them has a powerful influence over the kingdom's affairs and military power. The previous king of Esquilor had 3 queens from each house. The first child born from the first queen, the daughter of Duke Selekeze, was Burmalik II, the tyrant king. Burmalik ignored his duties as king and oppressed the land with violence. Under the pretense of protection, he massacred the house of Selekeze, his own mother's family. And still not satisfied, he persecuted the remaining 2 houses as well. So unable to bear his abuse any further, the 2 houses decided to unite by setting up an engagement between heirs of the house so they could launch a coup as the war ended. However, things didn't go according to plan, as the king decided to take action against this threat to his power. I heard that child was originally fine, but they say she went mad the moment she saw the people of the kingdom dying. Pitiful, isn't it? Lady Cladine added with sympathy. Do you think we are in any position to pity her? Duke Margrave snarled, his fist crashing down on the table. This morning, some vassals said they should put Amberic in your place as the heir. Duke Margrave sneered, swirling his wine. Is Prince Hagal still hesitating? His lips curled in disdain. He is also weak-hearted, the king's cousin, a man of royal blood, the last surviving heir of the direct royal line aside from the king himself. But fate had not been kind to him. One tragic accident had left Hagal crippled, bound to a chair, unable to sire any children and even step into the light. And yet, his very existence made him a dangerous pawn on the chessboard of power. Duke Margrave's temper finally snapped. His fist slammed against the table. Nothing works. Nothing changes. His rage echoed even after he stormed out. Lady Margrave leaned forward. That kid, she said softly. Do not show her affection. There is nothing flimsier than the affection of a man, she advised. Do not cause that poor child any further pain. Eric was shocked seeing her mother concerned, then nodded in agreement. Later that night, Eric walked down the corridor, his steps firm and steady, but his thoughts heavy. The maids whispered from the side, their words laced with disdain. Do as I say, you mad woman, one muttered. Is she energetic because of the good food they gave? Another added. But did you see the look on their faces? They continued until Eric entered. You did well. Now you can rest. I will take care of her, he ordered. Though he had only heard a little, it was enough for him to understand how the princess had been treated by these maids. Both maids hesitated, fearing he had overheard them, then quietly left. It seems like you are in a good mood today, my lady, Eric said, approaching her. He sat quietly beside her. I don't know if you can understand me, he said softly, but I hope you are comfortable here. The princess slowly lifted her head, her wide blue eyes meeting his. For a fleeting moment, clarity sparked in her gaze, and Eric felt his chest tighten. Was she beginning to understand him? The next moment, the princess suddenly spat at him. The act made everything clear. She hadn't understood a word he had said. Eric froze, stunned for a moment, then slowly wiped his face. My lady? You should not spit on another's face, he said gently, almost as though advising a child. Then he let out a faint sigh. Rest now, he added, his tone soft but firm, before turning away and leaving for his bath. The princess said nothing, her expression unreadable. As the night deepened, they eventually lay in bed together. Outside, a thunderstorm rumbled across the darkened sky. Lightning split the clouds, followed by the heavy roar of thunder. The princess's eyes shot open wide. Fear flickered in them, though she stayed silent, lying stiffly in the sheets. She did not move, only stared at the man sleeping peacefully beside her, her gaze unblinking as the storm raged on. The following day, they sat for breakfast. Eric, ever patient, tried to coax her. Did you sleep well last night? He asked gently. Her complexion looked pale, worse than before. You seemed fine before bed, but now... His words trailed as he studied her expression. Suddenly, she clutched at the food with her bare hands, smashing it messily across the plate. The hall fell quiet, the servants frozen at the display. Eric, however, only sighed softly. The past few days since the princess's arrival had been nothing short of hectic. The entire atmosphere within the mansion had shifted ever since Eric married her. It felt as though everyone had something to say, yet all held their tongues. Margrave Cladine eventually stopped joining his family at meals, which only fueled Lady Cladine's irritation. Even the vassals serving House Cladine seemed at a loss, unsettled by the sudden turn of events. And yet, in the midst of it all, Eric remained unchanged, calm, collected, and unwavering, as though none of it affected him. After finishing his training, Eric asked, "Where is my wife?" "She is in the maids' area," the attendant replied cautiously. Eric paused, wiping sweat from his face with a towel, his brows furrowed. Again? He made his way down the corridor. A faint light slipped through the crack. Inside, the princess was curled up on a pile of laundry, fast asleep, her golden hair spilling over the soft fabrics. The maids whispered among themselves. They admired her quietly, marveling at how even in slumber she looked fragile yet beautiful. One maid chuckled softly. She looks like a white cat. So cute. Suddenly, a knock startled them. "Oh, young master has arrived!" One maid gasped, and they quickly scrambled to their feet. Eric stepped in, his sharp eyes scanning the room. "Are the two maids away again?" he asked. The young maid stammered nervously. "Yes, my lord, but we took good care of her." Eric nodded curtly. "Good job." He walked to the princess and lifted her into his arms, her head lolling softly against his chest. "I will now take care of her now," he said. The princess stirred faintly as he descended the grand staircase with her in his arms. But suddenly, her body tensed. Her blue eyes widened, panic flashing within them. She let out a choked sound, thrashing violently against his hold. Eric grunted, tightening his grip to steady her as she struggled desperately, kicking and clawing. "Please wait until I drop you off," he said firmly. "If you fall, you will get hurt." She groaned, still resisting, but eventually quieted. At last he set her down on the bed. She clutched the blanket tightly, glaring at him with frightened, trembling eyes. Eric remained silent, watching her carefully. Days had passed since she arrived, and one thing had become painfully clear. The princess did not seem to like him at all. To her, Eric thought bitterly, "I must be nothing more than a means of transportation. Someone to carry her around." Eric's gaze followed. There, tangled in her golden hair, was a piece of yarn. Eric leaned forward, carefully brushing her hair aside, but she hides her face, clearly startled. "I didn't mean to startle you. I'll quickly remove what's on your head," he murmured softly. "Were you very surprised?" he asked quietly, his eyes watching her closely. The princess's bright blue gaze flickered up at him, tense and guarded. "White. I once saw a cat that looked like her." The memory of the maids chatting stirred faintly in his mind as he smiled to himself at the thought. As night deepened, the princess lay in bed sleeping silently. While in another room lit only by candlelight, Eric sat at his desk, buried in documents. There was these maids, always slipping away whenever they got the chance. Eric's instincts screamed that they were hiding something. He sighed deeply, pressing his hand against his temple. "There's too much to worry about," he muttered, thoughts drifting to the food shortage plaguing the territory's people. One particular sealed letter drawing his focus. The letter carried a report from a spy he had arranged. As instructed, they had followed Margrave's movements in secret. And just as Eric suspected, the man was not loyal. The report detailed how he had been seen meeting someone in the suburbs the previous night. Back when his father first suggested an engagement with the House of Crispin, Eric had been the only one to find it strange. At first glance, the proposal seemed perfectly natural, reasonable even. To everyone else, it made complete sense. But for some reason, Eric couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off. From that day onward, he began quietly keeping an eye on his father's actions. It was around that time he discovered that a barmaid had been frequenting his father's quarters. For Eric, it was the first time he had seen his father falter from the moral standards he had always upheld. Still, he chose not to make an issue of it. The war was far more important, and his focus had to remain on that. Even so, he had investigated the woman, suspecting she might have been planted by someone with ulterior motives. Yet, he found nothing. With no proof and no leads, he turned a blind eye. But after the war ended, things escalated. His father brought the woman back to their nation, going so far as to force his right-hand man, Sir Kelvinig, to take her as a second wife. Such devotion to a mere barmaid left Eric no choice. He gathered evidence of his father's conduct and sent a detailed letter to Lady Claddenay. Today, her reply finally came. "Do not send me any further reports of this matter. Let others have him. In fact, I feel relieved that I no longer have to dine with him." Those were Lady Claddenay's words. Eric sighed deeply, leaning back. He wasn't surprised by her response. In truth, his parents' marriage had always felt more like a business arrangement than anything resembling affection. Perhaps this outcome was only natural. His thoughts drifted as he tried to sort through the mess in his mind. And then, from the corner of his eye, he noticed movement. The princess had sat up in bed, rubbing her eyes like a child waking from a nap. The princess wandered barefoot through the quiet halls. She walked toward the faint glow of candlelight. She approached slowly, and he looked up, startled. "My lady," he said firmly. "Is there anything you need?" Without warning, she rushed forward, clutching at his chest as if seeking warmth and safety, and sat on his lap. Eric's eyes widened in surprise, his body stiffening at her sudden closeness. Her gaze dropped to the papers on his desk. Eric blinked. "Are you curious about that?" he asked. "It probably isn't that interesting." She stared at the papers for a moment, then suddenly began tearing them apart. Eric didn't stop her. He only watched quietly. His gaze lingered on the woman before him. Everything had happened so fast, their marriage, their lives bound together. And now, as he thought about it, this was the woman he would spend the rest of his life with. The day he had accepted his duty as heir, he had also stopped expecting anything from his marriage. It was never about affection or choice. It was responsibility. Mia's eyes shifted, landing on a particular letter sealed with an emblem. Slowly, she reached out her hand to take it. Before she could touch it, Eric's hand shot forward, catching her wrist midair. His deep voice broke the silence. "Stop. Startled, she looked up, realizing just how close he was. "You can't rip this," he said firmly, raising the letter high above her reach. She stretched out, trying to grasp it, but he held it tighter. "I won't give you this," Eric added, his tone unwavering. "I haven't finished reading it yet." The next morning, Lady Cladonay sat with her attendant, carefully analyzing several reports spread before her. Just then, Misa came walking towards her, making Lady Cladonay startle slightly. As usual, the princess soon lay down on the floor, falling into a peaceful sleep. "I am not sure how to address her," Lady Cladonay admitted quietly, her eyes lingering on the girl. She turned to Mia's maid. "How is she greeted at the king's mansion?" The maid, looking slightly annoyed, replied, "Well, I'm not sure." She gave no clear answer. Lady Cladonay's eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering across her face. The attendant leaned in and suggested gently, "Why not call the princess by her name? She has such a beautiful name." Lady Cladonay thought for a moment, then nodded. Turning back to the girl, she called softly, "Miesa." At once the princess jolted upright, her eyes wide as she stared at Lady Cladonay. Then, almost childlike, she grinned at her. "It seems she liked it," the attendant murmured under his breath. Lady Cladonay straightened, regaining her composure. "I can take care of her until dinner. You may leave now," she instructed firmly. The maid bowed and left the room. Lady Cladonay's eyes followed her, thoughtful. Something was off. Of the two maids who had come with the princess from the king's mansion, one tended to the princess with visible laziness, while the other was often nowhere to be found. There must be something behind this blatant lack of effort, Lady Cladonay thought grimly. "I don't know what they're trying to put on us," she murmured. "Go, bring me some headache medicine. It should be in my room." Understood, Adel bowed before leaving swiftly. Moments later, when Edel brought the medicine, she noticed something unusual. Princess Miesa was resting quietly at Lady Cladonay's feet. That was odd. Lady Cladonay was never the kind of woman to let anyone lean against her legs, let alone sleep there. Lady Cladonay's hand gently stroked the princess's hair, her expression softening in a way rarely seen. "The child... You said she was 20, right? I've heard that half of the court was butchered before her eyes when she was only a child. No wonder she went mad," she murmured. Her fingers moved through Misa's hair like a mother soothing her daughter. "Ever since, everyone has been using her for their own benefit. Such a poor child." Adil stood silently, listening to her mistress's quiet words. Lady Cladonay's eyes lingered on the girl's face. Her features are beautiful, especially the color of her eyes. Adel followed her gaze. Only then did she realize how close Lady Cladonay had grown to the princess. Come to think of it, the princess had the same eye color as Lady Cladonay's late daughter. Perhaps that was why the princess seemed to stir something in her mistress's heart. "Miesa," Lady Cladonay said softly, "let's cut your nails a little, and brush your hair too." Meanwhile, when Eric was finally free from his training, he, as usual, asked after the princess. "She is with Lady Cladonay," the attendant replied. Without hesitation, Eric made his way to his mother's quarters. But when he entered and saw the sight before him, he froze in shock. Lady Cladonay herself was seated with the princess's feet in her lap, preparing to cut her nails. "What are you doing?" Eric's voice was sharp, almost disbelieving. Lady Cladonay looked up calmly. "Oh, I was just about to cut Misa's toenails so she can walk comfortably." Eric stared, stunned. His mother, showing affection. Lady Cladonay was a woman who could occasionally pity someone, yes, but never like this, never so tender. She had been cold and relentlessly rational even to him, her own son. Yet now, that gentle look in her eyes. It was the very same look she had once reserved for his sister, Rosier. His chest tightened. "If she is projecting Rosier onto the princess, then I cannot allow it. I will do it. Please, give me the scissors," Eric said firmly as he stepped forward. For a moment, he wavered inside. He remembered his mother's face on the day Rosier died, an expression etched with something between anguish and obsession. Was it right to stop her now, or was he only denying her a fragile comfort? Still, he took the scissors into his own hands. As his strong hands held her delicate feet, Misa glanced quickly at him. The touch tickled her slightly, but she didn't flinch or resist. She simply lay there in silence. Some time passed quietly, until Adil noticed a faint frown forming on the princess's face. Unsure of the cause, she thought for a moment, then quickly picked up a small sweet cookie and held it to the princess's lips. Miesa accepted it without a word, nibbling quietly. Adil exhaled in relief. "Why did you do that?" Eric asked, his eyes narrowing toward her. "Oh, I just remembered the princess seemed to be fond of sweet things," Adil explained carefully. "I see." Eric gave a short nod, acknowledging her answer. Lady Cladonay, watching from her seat, smiled faintly. Her voice softened with quiet joy as she murmured, "How lovely. She truly does seem to enjoy it." That night, Eric sat with the princess, feeding her with his own hand. Patiently, he reminded her, "Chew slowly, don't swallow it all at once." He watched her carefully, almost as though teaching a child. But even as he guided her, his thoughts drifted. He couldn't understand why his mother was reminded of Rosier whenever she looked at the princess. If it was just because of her eye color, then even his cousin Amberic, who shared the same shade, should have stirred the same tenderness. Yet never once had his mother shown Amberic even a trace of that kind of affection. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. The attendant stepped inside, carrying a new dish, and placed it on the table. The moment the princess's eyes fell on it, her expression changed. She covered her ears tightly with her hands, her whole body trembling. "Miesa?" Eric leaned closer, startled. "What's wrong?" The princess didn't answer, only pointed with a shaking hand at the dish before turning her face away. Eric's gaze followed, and realization struck him. "Is it because of the roasted quail?" he asked gently. She gave no reply, only avoided his eyes and kept her face turned aside, refusing even to look at it. "I see." Eric's voice dropped, calm yet firm. "Take it away," he ordered the attendant. The dish was quickly removed. Still, Eric's eyes lingered on the princess, unsettled. It was the first time he had seen her react like this. He sat back, his thoughts heavy. Has she fallen sick before from eating quail? Or is there something else behind it? He couldn't help but wonder. The next day, Eric was out on the training grounds while the other knights practiced. He lifted his gaze to the sky. The sun was already high. His thoughts, however, were far from the drills. Did Miesa eat this morning? Yesterday she hadn't looked well, and the worry gnawed at him until he could no longer ignore it. He left the field to check on her. The attendant bowed and reported, "The mistress. She fell into the stream earlier. It seems she saw some fish, tried to get a closer look, and ended up falling in." Eric stiffened. "She fell?" "Yes, my lord. But she was with Lady Cladonay at the time, so there was no cause for alarm." Eric exhaled slowly, relief softening the tension in his chest. The attendant continued, "There's another matter. The mistress doesn't seem to care for chapel service. At first, she followed Lady Cladonay obediently, but once they arrived, she refused to enter. In the end, Lady Cladonay left her with a servant, while she went inside to finish the prayers." Eric listened in silence, then recalled how easily Miesa could be coaxed with sweets. From now on, he instructed, "Make sure there are always sugary treats placed on my desk." That night, he sat with Miesa again. This time she was in a far better mood, obediently eating as he fed her. Watching her, Eric felt a quiet sense of relief. He lifted a fork with another piece of food and offered it to her. But before she could take it, the piece slipped and fell against her chest. "Don't eat that," Eric said quickly. "I'll give you another one." He reached out, intending to set the soiled piece aside, but his hand paused mid-air. The piece had landed squarely on her chest. For a brief moment, he hesitated. Then, after a small breath, he picked it up. Miesa immediately leaned forward, opening her mouth to take the piece from his fingers. Startled, Eric pulled his hand higher. "No," I said. But she didn't let him finish. She grabbed his hand, tugging it down toward her. Her cheeks flushed red, her expression tinged with frustration. Then, without warning, she bit his finger. Her teeth pressed hard, but the sting wasn't what made Eric's heart race. It was the heat of her mouth enveloping his skin. His breath caught, and he hurriedly pulled his hand back. The princess blinked at him, startled as well. For a moment she just stared, then her eyes flickered past him. The next instant, her face darkened with anger. With a sudden tug, she yanked at the tablecloth. Dishes and cups clattered to the floor with a loud crash. At the doorway, her maid gasped softly. What on earth is going on? She wondered. Finally, she stepped forward and gently led the princess away to prepare her bath. Eric remained seated, silent. His eyes dropped to his hand, to the faint marks where her teeth had pressed into his skin. Later that night, while the princess slept peacefully as always, Eric lay awake. No matter how he tried, he couldn't chase away the lingering warmth that clung to his fingertips. He pressed a hand over his eyes. She's my wife, yet she's more like a child. She doesn't even understand that I'm her husband. I can't— His breath caught. I mustn't think of her in that way. That should never have happened. Never. The next day, Lady Cladonay mentioned, "We'll be hosting the poem recitation this Wednesday." Eric frowned slightly. "Is there really any need to go through with it?" "Of course," Lady Cladonay replied firmly. "They'll be circling for juicy gossip like hyenas. That's exactly why we must use this chance to show them how well we're doing." The gathering was no small event. Once a month, noble ladies from 3 houses came together to share recitations, exchange views, and, more importantly, gather information. This time, it was House Cladonay's turn to host. But what weighed most heavily on their minds was the fact that Marchioness Crispin and her daughter would be attending. It would be the first time their families met since the engagement was cancelled. Though it hadn't been House Cladonay's fault, Eric knew the Crispins would surely still hold a grudge. After their discussion, Lady Cladonay and Eric took Miesa to the greenhouse. The princess rushed inside with the eagerness of a child, wandering from one corner to another, curiously examining everything with wide eyes. Lady Cladonay busied herself with inquiries, while Eric stood back quietly, simply watching Miesa as she roamed. "Mistress, "Why didn't you come to our quarters today?" one of the maids asked as she approached, carrying a small bird cage. The moment Miesa turned her head, her eyes locked on the fluttering bird inside. Her mind faltered, suddenly dragging her back to that awful night, back to words her mother once whispered, words that still haunted her. The memory struck like a blade, her face drained of color. She let out a sharp scream and stumbled backward, collapsing to the ground in fear. Everyone froze, startled. "Miesa!" Eric shouted, rushing forward. He dropped to his knees beside her. "Miesa, are you all right? What happened?" "We don't know," a maid answered quickly. "She just got startled." Before anyone could say more, Miesa suddenly clutched Eric, burying her face against him like a frightened child. Tremors ran through her body as she held on to him desperately. Eric wrapped his arms around her, holding her steady. "As you can see," one maid explained stiffly, "the princess does not like birds very much. Then you should have told us that in advance," Lady Cladonay snapped, her tone sharp with anger. "We look after her every day," the maid retorted carelessly. "Why are you scolding us for missing such a tiny detail?" Lady Cladonay's eyes narrowed, her temper flaring, but she bit back her words. She had been suspicious of these maids from the very start. Still trembling in Eric's arms, Miesa wouldn't let go. Seeing her in that state, he spoke softly. "I'll take her outside to calm her down." Without waiting for approval, Eric carried her out of the greenhouse. His thoughts churned. Could this be the reason she recoiled from roasted quail the other night? He walked until they reached the garden and stopped at a wooden swing beneath the trees. Sitting down, he kept Miesa on his lap, holding her securely. "Don't worry," Eric murmured, his voice gentle. "If any bird comes near, I'll chase it away. You can rest." Miesa tilted her head, studying his face. His profile, calm and steadfast, carried a quiet strength. True to his word, his gaze flicked to every sound, alert to any flutter of wings. At last, reassured, she let her eyes close. Leaning against him, she drifted into sleep, comforted by the man's quiet vigilance. As they sat together, Amberic spoke with a hint of amusement. "I can see you're getting along with your wife." Eric glanced at him, unimpressed, but Amberic continued. "There have been a lot of rumors about the two of you. Even my household has heard what people are saying." Eric's brows furrowed. "Who is it this time?" he asked, his tone edged with annoyance. He knew his uncle was trying to push Amberic as the heir. Such rumors could not be ignored. Amberic leaned back, thoughtful. "Well, there's a maid named Vina, she has red hair, and another servant, Skinny, with brown hair. That's what I've heard." Eric exhaled slowly. He knew Amberic enjoyed his freedom and had no real desire to be heir. Their trust had been forged in battle, from saving each other's lives more than once. "Thanks, I guess I owe you one more time," Eric said with a sigh. "No worries," Amberic replied easily, lowering himself to sit on the ground. His gaze sharpened. "But what's going on with you? Don't tell me you're actually into her, because, seeing you now, it feels like you're overdoing it," he smirked. "People are even saying your wife's feet haven't touched the ground since she arrived, because you carry her everywhere." Eric frowned. "You know she limps. And not to mention the accidents that could happen if I don't take care." Amberic shook his head. "But I don't get it. At first I thought you were just putting on a show to fool the king, but right now there's no one watching. So why are you being so devoted to her?" His voice carried a trace of frustration. His eyes narrowed. "You're not seriously thinking of marrying her forever, are you?" Eric's gaze softened as he stroked Misa's head where she rested. His answer was calm, steady. "It doesn't matter who I marry, as long as they are of help to the House of Cladonay. Now that the princess is part of our family, the king will at least leave us alone for a while. And as for my kindness to her, she knows nothing. She doesn't even know whose lap she's sitting in. I don't want her to be mistreated." Amberic let out a long sigh. "Well, I suppose you're right." A few days later, the poem recitation was held. Ladies of various noble connections gathered inside the greenhouse, their voices mingling as they settled into their seats. Among them were Marchioness Crispin and her daughter. Once everyone was seated, Miesa and Eric appeared before them. They offered a few words of greeting, polite and restrained. Yet, under the surface, the air was taut. Eyes lingered on them for too long, silent stares pressing down like a weight. The tension between the two houses was palpable, and everyone's attention remained fixed on them. Eric, however, wasted no time. He lifted Miesa gently into his arms, thanked the guests for attending, and prepared to leave. But before they could depart, the daughter of House Crispin followed. "I need to speak with you," she said, her voice urgent. Eric turned, his tone sharp. "What is it? Following me here is an unwise decision." "Then I will be brief," she replied, steadying her gaze on him. "No matter what happens, do not have a child." Her words carried firm resolve. Eric said nothing. He could feel eyes watching them from nearby, and he knew it was best not to respond. The Crispin daughter, who had been clutching a handkerchief tightly the entire time, let it slip from her grasp. "Then, until we meet again," she said before leaving. On their way back, Marchioness Crispin asked, "Did you do what I told you?" "Yes, mother," her daughter replied quietly. All her life, Lacane Crispin had been taught nothing but how to be the perfect lady of a noble house. Yet what she truly wanted, no one had ever cared to ask. That night, Eric sat in his study as usual. His desk was buried beneath documents and reports, his thoughts weighed down. The war had left heavy damage, and now they lacked enough food to last through summer. If they could manage this season, then by autumn the soldiers returning from war would harvest their fields, and things would finally return to normal. Normally, such a crisis should have been eased by the rewards granted to House Cladonay from the king. But what they received were only trivial trophies, a Harlech iron mine, and a single princess. These were the king's rewards. The mine would take time before it became useful, and it could do nothing to fill their stores with food now. Financially, it was not disastrous, but the real burden came from the eyes of the vassals. In his father's absence, they all looked to Eric, expecting him to produce the best possible solution. The responsibility was crushing him more than he had anticipated. As his thoughts tangled, a soft weight pressed against him. From the side, Miasa came quietly and settled herself onto his lap, wrapping her arms around him as she often did. Eric stilled, realizing once again that Amberic's questions had no clear answer. He could not explain it, even to himself. Why he let her close, why he cared for her this way. He exhaled and lightly patted her back. Miasa turned, her finger pointing toward a glass bottle on the desk. Eric reached in and pulled out a single candy he had kept there for her, placing it gently in her hand. As she popped it into her mouth, a small smile tugged at her lips. And every time he saw that smile, his own burden seemed to lift, just a little. The comfort this fragile young woman brought him gave him an odd, inexplicable sense of satisfaction. The next day, the maids of House Crispin arrived, asking for the handkerchief their lady had left behind. Lady Cladonay's eyes sharpened immediately. She knew exactly what it meant. In high society, to leave a handkerchief in the house of one's former fiancé, who was now married, was nothing short of a token of love. "Edel," she ordered calmly, though her voice carried steel. "Gather the maids and search for it. And make sure word spreads that the handkerchief belongs to Marchioness Crispin herself. That way, there will be no unnecessary rumors." Inside the greenhouse, Cladonay's maids began their search, joined by Crispin's servants. Among them, a secret meeting took place between Crispin's head maid and one of the princess's own main maids, the very one who had come with her from the king's mansion. The head maid spoke in a low, firm voice. "Let me be brief. She must be taken care of within 2 years, at the very latest." A sly grin spread across the princess's maid's face. "If you wish, I could have it done by tomorrow." "No," the head maid cut her off sharply. "So sudden would raise suspicion. And we cannot come here too often." The princess's maid leaned closer, her eyes gleaming with a dangerous glint. "Then just let me know. I can come to you." That night, the family gathered for dinner. Margrave Cladonay, who rarely joined them, was present. But his irritation grew quickly at the sight of the princess. A dog would have better manners than her, he scoffed, his voice dripping with disdain. Lady Cladonay, seated gracefully, answered with a sweet, sarcastic smile. "Darling, if it's that hard for you, why don't you ignore Miasa altogether? After all, I doubt she wants any of your attention in the first place." The Margrave's anger flared. He pushed back his chair and stood, his eyes dark. But before leaving, he threw one last warning over his shoulder. "Just remember, we must visit His Majesty soon. Make sure she doesn't have any bruises." In the kingdom of Esquiller, it was customary for newlyweds to visit the bride's family 50 days after their wedding. And so, when the day came, Eric entered the royal palace, Miasa by his side. He bowed deeply. "Greetings to your Majesty," he said in solemn respect, holding Miasa gently alongside him. "Indeed, it's been long since we last met," the king greeted with a wide grin. As usual, Miasa slumped to the ground, lying there lazily. The king chuckled. "Seeing as how our Miasa seems to be doing well, I expect we'll soon be hearing news of a child." Eric bowed his head slightly. Ever since their marriage, he had done everything possible to avoid raising the king's suspicion. "We hope the same, your Majesty. But I'm afraid my wife's health is not yet fully well," he answered carefully. The king's attendant leaned in, murmuring something in his ear. The king's smile faded. With a sharp flick of his hand, he dismissed the servant. His voice, when he spoke again, was dangerous. "I don't want my time wasted. Miasa's ladies-in-waiting told me something rather interesting. They said although the sheets were drenched in blood, not a single drop was found when they bathed the princess afterward. That made me think, perhaps you don't want a royal bloodline. Tell me, Eric, are you keeping her intact so that you can cancel this marriage?" Eric's chest tightened. "No, it's not like that," he said firmly. He had believed his efforts enough to silence the maids, but clearly it wasn't. The king's eyes glinted. "It seems House Cladonay sought to deceive the crown. Perhaps this could even be seen as an act of treason." Eric's face paled. He had never feared sacrificing himself, but what would become of his people if the king struck them down? "Come here, Miasa," the king called. The princess crawled toward him. He stroked her head with a chilling smile. "My little sweet Miasa, perhaps you'll tell me the truth. Did your husband take off your clothes that night?" Miasa said nothing. The king's hand tightened, cruelly yanking her hair back. Answer me, Miasa. His voice had no warmth now. Her lips quivered. Then, for the first time, broken words escaped her mouth. It hurts. Eric's eyes widened in shock. He had never heard her speak before. Here. It hurts, Miasa repeated, pointing to the spot and clumsily explaining with gestures. Gasps rippled through the hall. Faces turned away, shocked and embarrassed. Stop, the king snapped, rising to his feet. That's enough. I have no desire to hear details of my sister's wedding night. With a swift kick, he shoved Miasa aside. Take this thing with you and leave, he spat at Eric. Eric clenched his teeth, fury burning inside him. But there was nothing he could do here. Wordlessly, he lifted Miasa into his arms and left the palace. On the ride home, silence clung to them. He held her in his lap, saying nothing. Miasa, too, remained still, eventually drifting to sleep without a sound. As soon as they returned, Eric's voice cut through the quiet. Make sure no one enters the second floor of the West Wing. The princess's maids exchanged confused looks, unsure of what was happening. Miasa struggled faintly in his hold, but Eric did not release her. Cullen? He ordered his right-hand man, stand guard at the door. No one enters this room. When they entered, Eric pushed Miasa down onto the bed. His voice was low, edged with anger. Now, no one will listen to you here. No one will come. Whether you scream or cry, no one will hear. So speak. I know you are capable of it. Miasa swallowed hard, realizing she had no choice but to reveal the truth. Darling, why don't you simply ignore Miasa altogether? She said quietly. Eric froze, his eyes widening. After all, she repeated, I doubt she wants any of your attention in the first place. They were the exact words Lady Cladonnay had spoken at the dinner table. Eric's chest tightened. He could hardly believe what he was hearing. What were those things you said in front of the king? He asked, his voice low but sharp. Miasa smirked faintly. They'll be after juicy gossip like hyenas. We must show them how well we are doing. The words struck him again with a jolt. That too? Those were Lady Cladonnay's very words. Though she spoke clearly, Eric noticed her hand trembling faintly. Beneath her defiance, there was fear. Slowly he stood, releasing her. My apologies. I didn't mean to frighten you, he said quietly, stepping down from the bed. For a long moment, silence lingered. People always said the princess had watched her mother die when she was only 8 years old. After that, she had witnessed her siblings slaughtered by the king's hand. To survive, perhaps she had chosen to act mad. Her madness a shield. Eric found himself at a loss. He wanted to comfort her, to say something, anything. But no words would come. All he could do was sit in silence. In the morning, Misa's lady-in-waiting entered with a tray of breakfast. She approached briskly, urging the princess to wake. Then, without hesitation, she tugged back the covers to check. Eric's gaze sharpened on them. He had thought the king might have executed these maids for their lies, yet here they were again, checking, prying, confirming whether he and his wife had fulfilled their marital duties. Why don't you let her sleep a little longer? Eric said firmly. The maid startled, stiffened under his stare, then nodded quickly, suspicion flickering in her eyes, before bowing and retreating from the room. As the day began, Miasa carried out her usual list of tasks. Her first act was to scatter and wreck the table, leaving it in complete disarray. Then she moved on to the black-haired man's clothes, tearing them with her teeth like some wild creature. Her last task was to grab hold of her lady-in-waiting and yank out strands of her hair until the woman cried out. Only then, with chaos around her, did Miasa consider half her daily duties complete. Today, however, something was different. Her maid lingered far longer while checking her body. Miasa knew why, because of that black-haired man. The thought of him made her freeze. Now that he had discovered her secret, what if he told the others? What if he tried to drive her out of this house? Her chest tightened. No. It was true he had been angry last night, but still, he didn't seem like the kind of man who would purposely harm her. Yet the doubt gnawed at her, and if he did tell them, then what? Panicked, Miasa ran straight into the hall. Lady Cladonnay was seated there with her usual composure. Oh, Miasa, did you sleep well? Lady Cladonnay asked warmly as soon as she noticed her. Miasa said nothing. Instead, she collapsed into Lady Cladonnay's lap, burying herself there like a frightened child. The lady stroked her hair tenderly. You must still be half asleep, she murmured. Miasa let out a slow breath of relief. Lady Cladonnay was still the same with her. Nothing had changed. While Miasa rested at her side, Lady Cladonnay turned her attention back to her butler. They discussed household matters. We have purchased mojo wood for the garden decoration, the butler reported. At once, Miasa's ears perked up. Mojo wood? Isn't that incredibly expensive? Even the royal palace uses it sparingly. The butler then presented a sample of fine butter. This quality block costs 20 pesos each, he said. Miasa's eyes widened. That much money? For such a small amount of butter? Noticing her curiosity, Lady Cladonnay smiled faintly and held it out to her. Would you like to try? Miasa took a small bite, chewing slowly. She had overheard before from the maids, with the same money, they could easily buy an entire sack of flour. That night, she remembered, the black-haired man had spoken of the food shortage and his worries about their people. Wouldn't flour be more useful than this butter? She wondered anxiously. But Lady Cladonnay was delighted at her reaction. You seem to like it, she said gently. Order 5 more barrels of this butter, she instructed the butler. Misa sighed quietly. She couldn't understand it. Why did Lady Cladonnay and that black-haired man always look so pleased whenever she ate? Was it because they actually cared about her? That seemed impossible. No one had ever cared for her before. Later, as usual, Eric arrived after completing his duties, but this time, Miasa recoiled, reluctant to go with him. Even Lady Cladonnay raised a brow at the sight. Miasa's wide, pleading eyes seemed to beg, "Please don't make me go with him, help me." Before anything could be said, Eric stepped forward. Without hesitation, he bent and lifted her in his arms as he always did. Miasa clutched frantically at his shoulders, her body stiff with dread. The man leaned close, his voice low against her ear. "Miasa," he whispered, "it would be wise to come with me. You see, I haven't told anyone about last night, yet." Her body flinched instantly. Her breath caught in her throat. To her ears it sounded less like a reassurance, and more like blackmail. At the dinner table, they sat facing one another. "I assume you can dine without my assistance now?" Eric said calmly. Miasa only stared at him, the same man who had blackmailed her just moments before. Now she was certain she didn't like him. Her eyes fell on the fork and knife in her hands, and her brow furrowed. She hadn't used such utensils in nearly 10 years. Her hands trembled as she tried to cut and lift the food, forcing herself to practice. Eric, watching her carefully, gave a small nod. "It seems you are quite proficient at this." Miasa frowned deeply at his words, unimpressed. There was nothing proficient about her awkward movements. What a strange man, she thought bitterly. Then, with irritation bubbling up, she dropped the fork altogether and began eating with her hands, munching angrily. Eric studied her quietly for a while before speaking again. "What upset you this time?" he asked. Miasa glared at him, licking her fingers pointedly. "Wasn't it obvious? If anyone saw the table spotless, wouldn't they grow suspicious? What was the point of raising unnecessary doubts?" Eric leaned his cheek into his palm, exhaling softly. "I understand," he said at last. "So please, stop." Miasa froze at his tone. Was he angry? Did I upset him? But Eric stood, dragged his chair beside hers, and sat close. She wondered she had eaten like this many times before, so why was he reacting so differently tonight? Before she could puzzle it out, Eric reached forward, tilted her chin upward, and gently wiped her mouth clean. His voice was quiet but steady. "Do you wish me to keep feeding you as before?" Miasa blinked, then slowly nodded. Perhaps this man wasn't as oblivious as she thought. So, as she wished, Eric fed her once again. Their dinner ended in silence. After dinner, Miasa went with her maid for a bath while Eric waited outside. Inside, the head maid harshly poured a bucket of cold water over her, making Miasa flinch. She lifted her gaze, her eyes narrowing. The maid's anger was sharper tonight. Miasa knew why. It was because of the man standing outside. So, refusing to back down, Miasa clenched a fistful of the maid's hair, pulling hard. If they called her mad, then she would act mad. The maid shoved her to the floor, and the struggle turned into a petty fight. "What are you doing?" Eric demanded as he entered suddenly, having heard the commotion. The maid straightened at once, forcing a smile. "Oh, my lord. As you see, the princess suddenly caused a commotion, so I was trying to restrain her. She often does this, so we have no choice but to handle her." Eric's gaze darkened. "Then allow me to do it." He stepped forward. The maid faltered, her smile stiff. "But my lord, it's too troublesome for you to take on personally. There is no need for you to trouble yourself with such exhausting tasks." Eric's voice was low, firm. "It is my duty as her husband to take care of her, isn't it?" The maid hesitated, then reluctantly explained the so-called process of bathing the princess, how they were supposed to use shampoo, oil, and cream on her body. Miasa, listening silently, clenched her fists. She knew it was a lie. They had never treated her that way. To them, she was no better than an animal, doused with cold water and left to shiver. Finally, the maid gave her instructions and left, the door closing behind her with a heavy slam. Eric let out a quiet sigh. He had spoken on impulse, but now reality sank in. What have I done? How am I supposed to manage this? He glanced at Miasa, then cleared his throat awkwardly. "Are you capable of washing yourself?" he asked, his voice low. The thought of the mad princess tending to herself was absurd. Miasa shook her head firmly. "I see," Eric muttered. His face warmed, ears turning red with embarrassment. Eric began rattling through the items prepared for her bath, arranging them one by one with unusual seriousness. Miasa sat there quietly, glancing at him. She could not understand him at all. Was the man angry again? If he was, then she needed to cooperate as much as possible. For now, survival depended on it. She stood and walked toward him, letting her towel slip to the floor. Eric flinched, quickly turning his head to cover the sight. "What are you doing?" he began, but the words died in his throat. He froze. Across Miasa's back were countless red marks, scars of harsh lashes and punishment. To Miasa, obedience had been decided the moment she first met him. She feared this man. What if, like the king, he also struck her with the whip when angered? The memory made her shudder. Even if she believed he was different, what if she pushed him too far? Her body stiffened, and she lowered herself to the floor. sitting with her back turned to him, preparing herself for punishment. But the blow never came. Instead, a large, calloused hand moved gently over her back, slow and soft. "Who did this to you?" Eric's voice was rough with irritation, yet beneath it there was something else, worry. Misa blinked, startled. Pity? She had never heard such a sad voice directed at her before. Slowly she turned and whispered the truth, the king. Eric let out a long, heavy sigh filled with restrained anger. His reaction confused her further. Was he angry at me or at someone else? Then, without another word, he began to prepare her bath. He tested the water temperature with care. "Let me know if it feels uncomfortable," he instructed. His voice was awkward, but steady. "I've never done this before, so tell me if something feels wrong." Misa gave a dazed nod. Why was he working so hard at this? He could have treated me like the maids do, dousing me carelessly, but instead, he followed each step of the earlier instructions with unexpected diligence. He washed her hair slowly, carefully working the shampoo through. His touch was gentle, so unlike what she knew, that her eyes grew heavy. She felt as though she might drift to sleep. "Now, I will wash your body," Eric said quietly. His hands hesitated as they moved downward, his ears flushing red. Misa squirmed slightly, a ticklish sensation running over her skin. She turned in reflex, only to find his gaze locked on hers. They both froze. The madwoman, who should not have cared about such things, suddenly realized the strangeness of it. The emotion in his face, the quiet apologies he murmured for every small touch. It was different, and for the first time, Misa understood. Normal people would feel embarrassed in a moment like this. And now, she was feeling it too. That unfamiliar heat rising in her chest, that awkward flutter. Was this her first taste of embarrassment? After finishing her bath, Eric was so exhausted, he flopped onto the bed the moment he reached the bedroom. Misa hesitated, then sat down beside him. "You should lie down too," he said quietly before pulling her beside him. Within moments, he drifted into sleep. Misa looked at the man lying next to her. He's the one who's tired, so why does he always insist on me resting? Every time she thought she had figured him out, he confused her again. Yesterday, he had threatened her. Today, he had pitied her when he saw the scars on her back. Still, she knew this much. He was better than most people she had met. She raised herself and leaned closer, studying his face carefully. He seemed to be deeply asleep. Quietly, she slipped out of the bed and made her way to the dressing area. Sometime later, Eric stirred awake and found the bed empty. Faint sounds drifted from the dressing area. Following them, he discovered Misa standing before the mirror, her lips moving as she repeated sentences she had heard throughout the day. When she noticed him in the doorway, she echoed one of Lady Cladonay's phrases, with a strangely bright tone. "Misa is only trying to practice, darling. Don't say such things to her." The next morning, the maids came to Misa's room for their thorough check. Because Eric had been present the previous night, they hadn't been able to inspect her properly. They peered between her legs now, frowning. If they really had... Why was it so clean there? It was a routine she had endured many times before, but today it felt different. Yesterday she had learned what embarrassment truly was. She had felt it with the man. And now with the maids, the act felt offensive. Thinking of Eric, she realized he had discovered yet another of her secrets. When she pretended to be mad, she didn't care if others mocked her. But the thought of someone seeing her true self and laughing, especially him, made her stomach tighten. She was sure she looked strange in his eyes. Maybe the sight of her disgusts him. And I can't blame him, one of the head maids said in open disgust. What man would want to give his seed to someone like her? The word stuck. It had been a while since Misa had hurt herself, but now she felt the need to do something. Something to make everyone frown, to remind them of who she was supposed to be. Later, as she limped through the castle halls, she weighed her options. Should she break an expensive ornament? But she shook her head at once. She couldn't destroy something belonging to people already close to starvation. So she came up with another idea, to hurt herself instead. Waiting until her maid's attention drifted, she prepared to fall deliberately. But before her body could hit the ground, a firm hand wrapped around her waist, holding her in midair. She turned her head. It was him. She hadn't even realized when he'd come. "I will look after my wife. You can leave," Eric ordered sharply, dismissing the maid without looking away from Misa. They sat together in the garden, where Eric assured Misa that he had already gotten rid of any birds nearby. "You don't need to worry. There aren't any here," he said gently. Then, with curiosity, he asked, "Do you really dislike birds?" Misa nodded. Eric stayed silent for a moment before continuing. "May I ask why?" Misa frowned inwardly. Again, always questions. The man never stopped pestering her. "Bird, ate," she muttered, the broken words falling from her lips. "Ate what?" Eric pressed further. Misa glared at him. First he had dragged her here without her permission, and now he was forcing her with endless questions. "There's no one here, Misa," Eric reminded her quietly. "You can speak freely." But for Misa, that was never the problem. She fidgeted, her fingers twisting nervously. Eric studied her, his gaze sharp, as though he could read the answers straight from her face. Then, suddenly, he asked, "Perhaps. Do you find speaking difficult?" Misa's eyes widened. He understood. Could it be that you haven't spoken to anyone in quite some time? So, even though you can form words in your head easily, lining them up aloud is hard? Eric explained. Misa had never given it much thought before, but hearing his explanation, she realized he might be right. Slowly, she nodded. Then instead of just nodding, he said steadily, "Try to say whatever you can, however short." Misa hesitated, but his determined look pushed her to try. She forced out a quiet, "Okay," but the sound came out strange, broken. Embarrassed, she quickly covered her mouth, her cheeks burning. "It will get better with time," Eric reassured her. Then, to her surprise, he took her hand and placed it on his throat. "Here, try to imitate how I do it," he explained, letting her feel the rise and fall of his pitch. Misa's eyes widened with curiosity. "This is what I was taught when my voice first started breaking. Would you like to try?" he asked, releasing her hand. She tilted her head, puzzled. "What is voice break?" Eric blinked, then burst into unexpected laughter. Misa frowned. It wasn't funny. Why was he laughing? "I'm sorry," he said quickly, calming himself. "I didn't expect that to be your first question." Then, more gently, he explained, "Voices change with age. That's what I meant by voice breaking." "Do you have anything else you want to ask me?" he prompted. Misa thought for a moment, then remembered her maid's constant warnings. With a deep breath, she spoke plainly. He hasn't touched her, even though he sent everyone away. Eric blinked in confusion. "Excuse me?" Misa sighed inside. Why doesn't he understand? Having no choice, she showed him the exact spot her maid always talked about. Eric's eyes widened in shock, then his face flushed crimson. Quickly, he grabbed her legs and closed them shut. "Please, don't do something like that again," he said firmly, his voice strained. Misa glared at him as if demanding silently, "Now you understand?" "When we do it?" she asked bluntly. Eric froze. Her words caught him off guard. But for Misa, it was simple. If they didn't fulfill their duties, there was no telling when she might be dragged back to the king. I'm not sure," Eric admitted at last. "I need more time. I think we should try to get to know each other first. Then perhaps I can ease your discomfort a little sooner." He stood abruptly, perhaps to change the subject. Then, "Allow me to show you the greenhouse." He held out his hand to her. Misa hesitated. They didn't have time for such things. And yet, she took his hand. It wasn't going to happen today anyway, so perhaps, for a while, she could enjoy this man's company. As he guided her through the grounds, Eric asked gently, "Are your legs completely well now?" Misa turned to him, then grinned proudly. "You completely caught me," Eric muttered with a faint shock. Her grin widened, taking it as a compliment. But then she remembered. She shouldn't walk normally for too long. So after a while, she raised both arms toward him. Eric was startled at first, then understood her meaning. He scooped her up into his arms. "I suppose you walked more than usual?" he said with quiet amusement. Misa fidgeted with her hair, secretly flustered. "This man, he's kinder than I thought. If only his kindness could last a little while longer," she wished silently. Misa remembered how a priestess once recited the process of a wedding night to her. The woman had spoken in a flat, monotonous tone, as if it were no more than a formality. To Misa, the strange words had sounded bizarre, almost absurd. When the priestess mentioned that it could be painful, Misa had assumed it must simply be another tiresome duty, and thought nothing more of it. But now she realized it had become her best chance to keep this marriage intact. If it were up to her, she would have gotten it over with as soon as possible. Yet it involved him, this man. And since their last conversation about it, several days had passed, with Eric giving her excuse after excuse. The king might execute him if this matter was left undone. Why then was she the only one who seemed to care? Or perhaps he was putting it off because he wanted to end the marriage altogether. "Misa," Eric's voice called, noticing her dazed expression. But she was lost in thought, hearing again the maid's cutting words. What if the sight of her disgusts him? Could that be the reason? "Misa," Eric called again, louder this time. She bit her lip. She needed to secure this marriage, because life with the Cladonnet family felt safe, almost like the days when she had lived with her mother. "Misa!" Eric finally shook her shoulder, forcing her back to the present. "Are you all right? I called you several times." Lowering her gaze, Misa repeated the maid's words softly. "I suppose. I can't blame him. What man would want to give his seed to someone like me?" Eric stiffened, startled. "What? Who said that?" His jaw tightened as realization struck. Was it the headmaid? Now he understood her restlessness. Sitting beside her, his tone softened. "So that's why you're in such a hurry, but as I've said before, we hardly know anything about each other?" Misa looked at him bitterly. This again. "Why don't we get to know each other first?" Misa repeated his words. "Then perhaps I could take care of your discomfort a little sooner." Her lips pursed into a pout. Eric chuckled, amused. "So you were listening to me that attentively? And now you're saying I should go to bed with you just because you listened to me talk for a few minutes? Don't you think that's a rather overwhelming request?" He leaned closer, his tone teasing. Before she could reply, he suddenly turned away. I'm afraid I still need more time to prepare for our union. It's not something that can be done in a flash, he declared, almost casually. Miasa frowned. The maids had told her even strangers could do it without hesitation, so what was this man talking about? That night, they sat together on the bed, the tension between them lingering. Miasa wanted to consummate the marriage, but Eric wished to take things slowly. Why don't you tell me about yourself each night, he suggested, and in return, I promise I'll cooperate with your wish. For a start, something easy. What is your favorite food? Meat, Miasa answered without hesitation. Eric chuckled. Simple enough. He continued with more questions, and she gave short replies. But after a while, her head began to throb. Enough, Eric, she blurted suddenly in frustration. He froze. Then his eyes widened. Was that my mother? He asked, shocked. Yes. He realized she had been mimicking Lady Cladinet's tone. And then he laughed, loud and free, surprising Miasa. So this man can laugh at anything? She wondered. Oh, pardon me, Eric said at last, still smiling. But it was nice to hear my name from your mouth. Can you say it again? It wasn't as difficult for her now, so she quietly said, Eric. He looked at her with an unfamiliar expression, one she couldn't read. Then, smiling softly, he cupped her cheeks in his hands. It was pleasant to hear, he said warmly. And since you were gracious enough to grant my request, I'll have to return the favor. Leaning down, he kissed her gently on the forehead. Miasa blinked, raising her hand to the spot where an unfamiliar heat lingered. It was the first time anyone had shown such interest in truly knowing her. And she was right. Eric was curious about this princess who had worn a mask of madness for so long. Curious about what went on inside her small, guarded head. In truth, he wanted to know not just a little, he wanted to know everything about her. The next morning, Miasa's maids carried out their usual inspection. Once again, they found no proof of any intimacy between her and Eric. The head maid leaned closer, studying Miasa's blank expression. For a brief moment, she wondered if she had seen the girl make eye contact, something unusual for this mad princess. But just as quickly, she dismissed it as her own overthinking. The maids then turned to their own conversation. They spoke in low voices about visiting a certain family tomorrow, and about the advantage they might gain from it. A chill ran down Miasa's spine. One of the maids forced her to sit as the discussion continued. But the unease grew stronger. Her instincts screamed danger. Something was wrong. If they continued, they might uncover her secret. She had to act before it was too late. Without warning, Miasa burst into loud, manic laughter. She twisted her face into strange expressions, cackling like a madwoman. The maids exchanged startled glances, taken aback by her sudden outburst. Then, before they could stop her, Miasa bolted from the room. Her plan was clear: cause a scene, cause chaos. Hesitation was no longer an option. She ran until she reached a balcony. Checking quickly, she saw enough people nearby to witness what she was about to do. Climbing onto the railing, she leapt. In her mind, the bed of flowers below would cushion her fall. Later, in her room, Miasa lay on the bed after being retrieved. Lady Cladinet stood before her maids, her voice sharp as she scolded them. Moments later, Eric entered, having heard the news. What happened? He demanded. The maids flinched under his gaze, but none dared to answer. Ignoring them, Eric went straight to Miasa's side. At first, he had not taken the incident seriously, but seeing her lying there pale and wounded, his expression hardened. Things had gone far beyond acceptable. He called for Gela, the Cladinet family's medic. Treat her properly, he ordered, his tone brooking no argument. Then he turned to the maids. From now on, one of Cladinet's own maids will stay with the princess. The maids stiffened, their eyes flickering with unease. They hesitated, but under his command they could not refuse. Eric's gaze shifted to his mother. Lady Cladinet's face was dark with anger, the kind one might show over her own child. Eric knew well why. His mother had begun to see Miasa as Rosiei, his late sister. When Rosiei was killed by a drunken knight, Lady Cladinet had ordered the knight's entire family destroyed. That decision had driven a bitter wedge between his parents, one that never healed. Mother, Eric said carefully, this accident concerns my wife. I believe I should take responsibility for her care. Before Lady Cladinet could answer, Gela entered with her report. The wounds are not severe, my lord. They will heal quickly. Her mobility is unaffected. Lady Cladinet exhaled, visibly relieved. That was what she had wanted to hear. You are right, she said at last, her voice calmer. You are perfectly capable of handling this matter. She leaned down and pressed a kiss to Miasa's forehead before leaving the room. Eric then turned back to Gela. From tomorrow, you will serve as the princess's personal maid. The sudden order stunned Gela. She blinked, but then bowed her head and nodded. Yes, my lord. With that, she quietly departed, leaving Eric alone with Miasa. As the door closed, Eric stepped to the bedside. I know you're awake, he said firmly, standing over her. And I also know you must have your reasons, so would you mind explaining? Miasa trembled slightly but kept her eyes shut, pretending to sleep. Eric exhaled in frustration and sat down beside her. Misa, don't be afraid. Just tell me, why did you do what you did today? After a long silence, Misa whispered, there is a reason, but it's hard to explain. Eric leaned closer, his voice suddenly sharper. Then listen carefully. Do anything you want, but never, never hurt yourself. Do you understand? Promise me. Startled by the sudden intensity in his tone, Misa nodded slowly. Only then did Eric sigh in relief. Good. Now, about the maid I chose for you. She's not only a medic, she's skilled in combat and in keeping secrets. For now, you still need to act the same, but with her near, you'll be safer. And do you remember Cullen, my right hand? I intend to have him guard the entire second floor. He's the most trustworthy man I know. He paused, then added quietly, I haven't told anyone about you, but now that you're injured, I'll need to take some time off until you recover. Misa's eyes lit up, her face brightening as if her wish had been granted. She suddenly sat up. Does that mean more time? More talking? Do it now or tomorrow? She asked eagerly. Eric blinked, caught off guard. What are you talking about? Don't you realize how badly you're hurt? He said, exasperated. Misa only pouted, confused at his reaction. She pulled different expressions one after another, and Eric, despite himself, found his eyes following each one. He shook his head. Don't bring that up again until you've recovered, he said, trying to look away. But no matter how he tried, his gaze returned to her. Finally, he asked, why are you so eager about it? Misa opened her mouth, repeating some familiar words she had overheard. Eric's eyes narrowed as he recognized them. His cousin Amberic's words, spoken when he advised Eric to cancel his marriage with her. Listen, Misa, Eric said firmly, gripping her shoulders. I have no intention of canceling my marriage with you. You know I've never hidden anything from you. You've even seen my important documents while sitting on my lap. So what else could I possibly hide? He gently laid her back down. Rest. If it makes you more comfortable, I'll even call for a maid to stay with you. You don't need to sleep in the maid's quarters anymore. I don't do it for fun, Misa muttered. It's because I can listen to them talk. Eric glanced at her, surprised. I used to do the same in the king's mansion, she explained, her eyes flickering with pride. That's how I learned Lady Malika bribed Lady Nymeria, the head maid. Her face lit up with a bright, proud smile as she recounted it. You're impressive, Eric admitted, bewildered. Behind every strange action of hers, there always seemed to be a reason. Perhaps. He lay down beside her, propping his head on one hand so he could look into her eyes. I wanted to speak with you a little more closely, he said. Misa stiffened, then suddenly beamed, convinced this was it. Finally, the man had agreed. But instead he asked, why did Lady Malika bribe Lady Nymeria? Her smile vanished instantly. She turned her head away in annoyance. Please say something, Eric whispered from behind her. Otherwise, we'll never become closer. Misa grumbled, but finally muttered in broken words, Malika, meet tomorrow, 3 pillars of kingdom. Eric frowned. 3 pillars? Did she mean the 3 main houses of the realm? But the house of Salakis, the king's late mother's line, barely existed in name. His thoughts flicked back to the day Lacaille Crispin stopped him, when he noticed Lady Malika listening behind a tree. So, the meeting must be with House Crispin. I suppose I'll arrange some people to trail them both, he murmured, determination settling in his voice. Misa tilted her head, confused. Why was he going this far? But if the man wanted to do something foolish, what was it to her? As she mulled over his strange behavior, she suddenly felt something warm against her cheek. Startled, she turned slightly. Eric had leaned in and placed a gentle kiss there. A token of gratitude for your answer, he murmured as he pulled back. Misa's fingers brushed over the spot where his lips had touched. This man, he still made no sense to her. The next day, when Eric entered the room, he found Gela in the middle of an argument with the head maid. Are you saying that I bought something that could harm Mistress Cladene? Gela's voice was sharp, her brow furrowed. How can I know? Malika snapped back, frowning deeply. But I cannot allow you to apply that ointment to her. If it was a fight she wanted, Gela had no intention of backing down. Without hesitation, she dipped her fingers into the ointment, scooped some up, and swallowed it right in front of them. I'm perfectly fine, aren't I? She declared loudly. The faces of Miesa's maids turned pale instantly. They had no response, no more reasons left to stop her. Eric, watching silently, smiled to himself. His choice of Gela had been the right one. He bent down, gently tucking Miesa's hair behind her ear. I'll be back before lunch, he murmured, brushing his thumb softly against her cheek. Then, turning to the other maids, he instructed, take care of her until I return, before leaving the room. As he walked down the hall, his expression hardened. He still didn't understand why Misa kept hurting herself, but he was strangely grateful. Because of that, he had been able to place Gela by her side, and if he wanted to make her more comfortable and discover her reasons, he first had to remove the king's constant surveillance. The first step was to assign the knight's training duty to Amberic. His cousin wasn't pleased, but Eric had no choice. The second was to order Cullen to secretly place men to follow Lady Malika and the Crispin family. Finally, he summoned Edil, Lady Cladine's personal maid. Edil had been by his mother's side since he was a child, skilled, trusted, and sharp. Yesterday, she had accompanied Lady Malika to the palace and returned with a detailed report of the incident. Because of your efforts, we will soon be rid of those two ladies-in-waiting, Eric told her sincerely. Edel bowed. But Eric's tone turned serious. The problem is, it will all be for nothing if their replacements are cut from the same mold. That is why I need your help. You are far more suited to this task than anyone else. He then told her what he had learned. That Lady Malika once bribed Lady Namiria, the head maid of the royal palace. He asked Edel to investigate quietly, without revealing his source, Misa, or informing Lady Cladeny. Edel thought for a moment, tapping her chin. Reaching Lady Namiria directly would be difficult. But her right hand, Viscountess Manel, has been having trouble with her brother-in-law. If we can help her resolve that, we may gain what we need. Satisfied, Eric nodded and dismissed her. By the time he returned to Mia's room, as promised, he was met with an unexpected sight. Mia was seated on the floor, clumsily painting with a brush in hand, while Gela leaned over her shoulder, teaching her. What is all this? Eric asked, surprised. Gela looked up, unfazed. Since we cannot take Mistress Cladeny outside, I thought painting might help her calm her emotions. She has been through much. Eric's gaze softened as he looked at Miesa. She seemed genuinely happy. He stepped closer, gently caressing her cheek. Then perhaps next time. Why not read her some books? He suggested. Gela nodded thoughtfully. Books are not a bad idea. I'll bring some children's stories next time. But as her eyes flicked back to Eric, she caught the way he was rubbing Misa's cheek with unmistakable tenderness. Before she could say anything, Eric turned sharply. You may leave for today, he ordered. Startled, Gela bowed and left, though irritation simmered beneath her calm face. Outside, she muttered under her breath, annoyed. How can he expect me to do 2 jobs, medic and lady-in-waiting, for the same pay? Cullen, standing nearby, overheard. Didn't you know? He said casually. Your wages have been doubled. Her eyes widened in surprise. She barely had time to process it before the door swung open again. Eric appeared, his expression brisk. Where are the princess's clothes? He asked. Beneath the shelf, Gela answered quickly. Thank you. He shut the door almost immediately. Gela blinked, at a loss for words, the way the captain looked at her mistress. It wasn't just duty. It was the gaze of a loving husband. There's nothing wrong with a man loving his wife, Cullen said, amused at her muttering. I suppose you're right, Gela said at last, laughing it off. But deep down, she wondered if her naive mistress had any idea of it at all. As usual, Eric prepared the bath, checking the water temperature with care. From behind, Misa's voice sounded. No children's book. He turned, a little confused. Pardon me? No children's book, I want... Adult talking book, she clarified in her broken words. Eric chuckled softly, then nodded. Very well, I'll tell Gela. He tilted his head slightly, smiling. Then shall we head over there now? But Misa quickly turned her back to him. Miesa? What happened? Eric asked, a little shocked. Embarrassed, she muttered. Eric embarrassed me. Uncomfortable. Embarrassed? He repeated, baffled. Am I the one who was embarrassed? Yes, Miesa insisted, pouting. Eric faced red. When I wash. Her cheeks puffed slightly as she added. I wash alone. Eric, get out. Eric hesitated, then lowered his voice. You're still injured. At least, let me wash your hair. Then I'll leave. After a moment's pause, Miesa nodded reluctantly. The paint stains on her skin would be too painful to scrub away by herself. He washed her hair carefully, speaking in a calm tone as his hands worked gently. Try to speak more rather than only using gestures. The practice will help you. When he finished, she pushed him lightly. Go now. Eric smiled at her stubborn expression. Call me if you need help, he said before stepping out. A while later, Miesa emerged from the bath with a deep frown. Washing herself had been far harder than she imagined. How was it? Eric asked, waiting outside. Gela wash me tomorrow, she replied curtly, her lips downturned. Eric laughed, unable to help himself. At least wear your nightgown properly next time, he teased. She had put it on backward. Later, as he dried her hair and carefully applied fresh bandages, he asked softly, How was your day? Gela nice, she answered simply. Are you comfortable here? Yes, I've already notified the chef about your tastes, Eric said, brushing her hair back from her face. But tell me, why were you so thin before? Misa was quiet for a moment, then repeated something her maid had once said. Why bother feeding a mad princess? Eric's jaw tightened. He understood now just how insolently her maids had treated her. They seem to have been quite insolent towards you, he muttered. But before he could say more, Miesa suddenly grabbed his hand. Her eyes trembled. If they hurt... Bearmol no, she whispered, reminding him not to punish them recklessly, afraid he might draw the king's suspicion. Seeing her fear, Eric softened, changing the subject. I see your speaking has improved a little. Yes, but I couldn't practice yesterday, Miesa admitted. Why not? He asked. She frowned. I usually practice at night, but yesterday when I tried to leave... Eric, she made a gesture, flop over me, trapped me, couldn't practice. Eric blinked, embarrassed, and rubbed the back of his neck. I must have... sensed you might try to leave, he said awkwardly. I talked now. Here. Misa said, pointing to her forehead. She leaned forward slightly, waiting. Eric laughed quietly, then cupped her face in his hands. He pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. "What are you, some kind of informant?" he teased. "Always making sure I pay up properly for what you tell me?" It was during this time that Misa slowly grew more accustomed to speaking. Each day she spoke a little more, asking questions. Sometimes they were simple, almost childish. Other times they left Eric struggling to find answers. But the more they spoke, the closer they drew, and words that once came haltingly from her mouth now flowed with greater ease. "I already know how to talk. I just needed to get it out of my head," Misa said, her eyes glinting with determination. "Now I gave you an answer. So you have to kiss me again." As usual, Eric leaned in, turning her face toward him and pressing a kiss to her lips. "Now that you're speaking," he suggested softly, "why don't we try addressing each other more formally? After all, we are husband and wife." Misa tilted her head, confused. "But I am a royal princess, and you are son of Claddenai. Why should I call you formally?" Eric burst into laughter at her genuine confusion, then explained, "Since you are my wife, that makes you one of the other nobles now as well." Her eyes sparkled at this new piece of information, and Eric found himself completely captivated by the innocent shine in her gaze. "Are you disappointed, my lady?" he asked, lifting her hand and kissing it gently. Misa smiled. "No, I like living here, so it doesn't matter to me." "I'm glad to hear that," Eric murmured, brushing his hand along her cheek. "You are nice." "I'm glad I saved your life," Misa said quietly. Eric blinked in surprise. "What do you mean?" "I saved your life, didn't I?" "When the king accused you of treason," she reminded him. Eric gazed at her in silence. If he hadn't married her, he wouldn't have been in danger in the first place. But looking at her beautiful face, her rosy cheeks, and her pure smile, he didn't regret it. "You're right, I am in your debt," he admitted at last. Misa laughed playfully. "Eric, I'm happy that I married you." Her smile was almost childlike, yet raw and sincere. Seeing those emotions on her face, Eric felt something stir within him. "Misa," he whispered, intertwining his fingers with hers. "You should close your eyes." He leaned closer, his hands stroking her lips gently. Her face turned crimson at the unfamiliar sensation. "Go on. Shut your eyes, Misa. There's no need to be nervous," he urged softly. Trusting his words, she closed her eyes. Eric leaned in and captured her lips, deepening the kiss as he pulled her closer. His heartbeat quickened with every passing second. Misa opened her eyes slightly, startled. "Why is he sucking my mouth as if there's food there?" "But there isn't." She couldn't understand. When Eric finally pulled back, both of them were breathing heavily. Her face showed shock more than pleasure. Eric kissed her forehead, then trailed down to her cheek before capturing her lips again. "Does it feel strange to you?" he murmured in between kisses. Before she could answer, his lips moved lower, pressing against her neck, sucking gently with growing affection. A moan escaped Misa subconsciously, but she quickly came to her senses and pushed his face away. "Wait. It's not like this. You don't know how? Have you ever done this before?" she asked, her voice flustered but serious. "The upper body has nothing to do with it. I know a lot. The priestess taught me." "So do as I say," she insisted firmly. But Eric only pulled her hand down and kissed her again. "This is all necessary for the part you just spoke of. It's to make sure the process will be less painful for you," he explained, voice low and steady. Misa frowned. "No, you must have learned it wrong. I'm afraid if you stop me like this, we'll never get anywhere," Eric reminded her, resuming his kisses. "And you see, this is the only way I know." She pushed his face again, frustrated. "Why are you so stubborn? This is all to save your life." He stopped, his lips hovering near her ear. "Are you doing all this for me?" he whispered. Misa froze, but didn't deny it. Eric's breath brushed against her skin as he whispered, "I'm touched, my lady, so I think I'll stay here even longer, since I don't want to cause pain to the wife who cares so much about me." Misa still thought to herself that this man must have gone mad. "Why don't you listen to me?" she asked, exasperated. Eric gave a wry smile. "That's exactly how I feel sometimes, so stop and hurry up, my lady." He leaned in closer once again. The next morning, Misa's maids checked on her as usual, but today they looked puzzled. "It's hard to say," one murmured. "Right," the other agreed, frowning. Meanwhile, Misa only yawned, playing her part as the mad princess. "In reality, that man ended up doing nothing but wasting time kissing me last night," she thought bitterly. As the maids whispered, one leaned closer. "Perhaps taking a lover has changed his heart?" "Shh," the headmaid hissed, nudging her. Then, lowering her voice, she added, "Look, his lover is here." They pointed toward Gela, who had just entered. "My lady, I brought these clothes for you," Gela said warmly. But when her eyes fell on Misa's neck, she froze. "Why do you have a rash on your body? Yesterday you were fine." She leaned closer, analyzing. Then suddenly, realization struck. Her face turned crimson with shock and embarrassment. Elsewhere, Edel reported to Eric, It seems replacing the princess's maids will not happen anytime soon, she informed. Eric frowned. Why? Why does the palace still refuse to replace them? Adel explained calmly. Lady Malika has a habit of stealing from the household she serves. When she was caught, she bribed the head maid and secured her position. With Viscountess Manel's help, I was able to gather records of the stolen items and the bribes. She handed him a report. Eric scanned the list, then gave a curt nod. Good work. Adil hesitated. Young master, yes? Eric asked. Perhaps you should... She stopped herself, clearly weighing her words. In the garden, Miesa played idly with Gela, but Gela still looked shaken. Has the captain finally lost his mind? She muttered under her breath. Then, crouching near Miesa, she whispered, If the young master ever does something you don't like, make sure to scratch and bite him. Promise me. Miesa only shifted uncomfortably. It wasn't like what Gela was imagining at all. I know you're married. And no one here would stop him anyway, Gela continued, her voice low with pity. But still, I always thought my little sister was more pitiful, but now... I'm not so sure. Miesa tilted her head as Gela began sharing something she had never told anyone. My sister, she once caught the plague. She survived, but she ended up like you. Back then, our family was poor. We couldn't afford medicine, couldn't afford to care for a sick child. One day, my father took her outside, and when he came back, he was alone. Her voice cracked slightly. I realized years later, my sister went to a place from which she could never return. Miesa listened silently. This time, she learned something new, that even a parent could abandon their child. Gela smiled faintly through her sadness. Thank you. I've never shared this with anyone before. She hesitated, then added, Mistress Cladonay. The truth is, the first time I saw you... But before she could finish, Eric's voice cut in. There you are, my lady, he said, striding toward them. His hand brushed Miesa's hair back from her face with gentle familiarity. I'll take care of her. You may leave. Gela hesitated, clearly reluctant, but she bowed and left. Miesa, however, wanted to protest. She wanted to hear what Gela had been about to say. You don't have to come here, Eric, Miesa said quietly, turning her face away. Eric looked startled. What do you mean? You don't like me around? Miesa shook her head. Slowly, she explained, Not like that. It's just, when you're here, nobody talks. Everyone keeps silent. But with Gela, I can hear people talk. I can learn something from them. I see. Eric's expression softened into something almost pained. I understand. Miesa studied him curiously. Why does he look upset? But then, he smiled faintly. I'm glad. Your complexion looks much healthier. He gently caressed her cheek, and Miesa blinked. He noticed the change before I even did. Being with him, though confusing, made her strangely happy. She hoped he would never change. To her, he seemed almost like the kings in the fairy tales she once read as a child. A king who was fair, merciful, and wise. Shall we return inside, my lady? Eric asked at last, rising to his feet. That same night, Eric's voice dropped low as his lips brushed against Miesa's neck. Please, continue what you were saying, he murmured, holding her close as she clung to him on his lap. What else do you like among the things I do for you? He asked softly. Miesa trembled. Again. This man keeps doing these strange, meaningless things to me. Why doesn't he just give me what I want already? Her breathing quickened. She didn't understand why it felt so hard to breathe when he touched her like this. I like it when you carry me in your arms, she finally replied. Eric's gaze deepened, his questions relentless. Why? Why? Miesa frowned. Isn't it obvious? We only need to do this to avoid being killed, so why does he keep asking? But when Eric suddenly pulled away, her heart jolted. Take your time, he said gently. Answer me. I can wait. Miesa blinked, stunned. He refuses to touch me unless I answer him. How underhanded. I've never met anyone as stubborn, or as scheming, as this man. Gritting her teeth, she gave him the truth. When I walk, I limp. It makes it hard to move. So I like it when you carry me. As expected, Eric smiled at her answer. Miesa, however, was left even more confused. Why is he so reluctant when they could just get it with? Perhaps, as my maid said, maybe he truly has had a change of heart and taken a lover. Remembering those words, she suddenly grabbed at his collar, her eyes wide and searching. We are lovers, right? Lovers are when a man and woman are special to each other. We are that, aren't we? She asked desperately, repeating herself. Eric stilled, then his gaze softened. We are not lovers, he said, his voice steady. We are a married couple. Her heart lurched. Then, could it be that you're married to me? But lovers with someone else? She asked, her face tight with tension. Eric's eyes hardened. What did your maid say to you this time? Miesa avoided his gaze, but her silence was answer enough. There are cases like that, yes, Eric admitted quietly. But I am not one of those people. You are the only one to me, and the same goes for you. His words carried weight, an oath rooted deep inside him. Eric had always despised disloyalty in marriage, perhaps because of his father's betrayal. He pulled Miesa tightly into his arms, anxiety pressing into his chest as if he feared she might slip away. He stroked her lips with his thumb, searching her face. "Tell me, have you picked up this accent from Gela?" he asked, recognizing the faint Kazan inflection in her speech. Miesa nodded nervously. "Why? Is it strange?" A soft smile broke across Eric's face. "No, it's cute." Then he leaned in, kissing her tenderly, affectionately. Miesa's mind whirled. "All we need to do is fulfill our marital duties. That's it. None of this, the kisses, the tenderness, none of this was ever part of the process the priestess recited to me. And yet, for some reason, these unnecessary, meaningless things stirred emotions within her. Strange, unfamiliar feelings that confused her and left her trembling. The next day, the maids presented a new dress they had made for Miesa, a soft cream gown with lace ribbons and a matching bib. The princess looked adorably elegant, and the maids couldn't hide their delight. "You look so pretty, Your Highness," one of them beamed, clapping her hands in excitement. Miesa blinked at them, uncertain how to react, while in the corner of the room stood Edel, her expression tight, her eyes clouded with irritation. Just a short while ago, she had been in Eric's office, voicing her frustration. "I can't just stand by and watch this house fall into ruin," she had said firmly. "You should consider taking a concubine." Eric had raised his gaze from the papers on his desk, his voice calm but sharp. "So your loyalty to the Cladine family now demands that I take another woman?" Edel clenched her teeth. "I can't stand seeing you neglect your duties. You've left everything to Amberic, all for someone you can barely even converse with. You spend your days replacing her maids and fussing over her garden walks. Why?" Eric turned to Cullen, who stood beside him, his tone even. "Am I neglecting my duties, Cullen?" "Not at all, my lord," Cullen replied immediately. "Since you resolved the food shortage by negotiating with Marquis Hetab, the people have begun to regain their trust in this house. And since Amberic took over the night training, even the soldiers have realized who their true leader is." Adel's lips tightened. Realizing her words held no weight, she bowed stiffly. "Forgive my impertinence, my lord." She left the room, but her frustration only deepened. To her, everyone, Eric, Lady Cladine, even the household knights, seemed bewitched by that mad princess. She couldn't understand it. A fool cannot run a house, she thought bitterly. Someone has to stop this before it's too late. That evening at dinner, Miesa suddenly looked up from her plate, her eyes gleaming with curiosity. "I want to see the world," she said softly. "The one in books? The streets? The people? I really want to go." Her tone was so earnest, so childlike, that Eric couldn't refuse. "Then we'll go tomorrow," he said with a gentle smile. But Lady Cladine frowned, clearly uneasy. "The princess has never left the mansion. The streets can be unpredictable. Take Gela with you, she'll ensure her safety." "Don't worry, mother," Eric reassured. "I'll be with her the whole time." "Still," Lady Cladine insisted firmly, "take her." He had no choice but to agree. Their carriage rolled through the cobblestone streets of the capital. Before long, Eric turned to Gela and said in a calm voice, "Meet us back here in 3 hours. Until then, you're free to do as you please." Gela hesitated, worried. "My lord," leaving her side, "I'll look after her," he interrupted. "You have my word." Though reluctant, Gela bowed and stepped away. Once she disappeared into the crowd, the carriage began to move again. Eric leaned toward Miesa, who was pretending to sleep with her head resting on his lap, and whispered near her ear, "You may get up now." Her eyes fluttered open, and she immediately pressed her face to the window, gazing out with pure wonder. The vibrant streets of the capital unfolded before her. Vendors shouting cheerfully, children chasing one another, women bargaining at stalls, the aroma of fresh bread drifting in the air. Eric watched her silently, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Seeing her mesmerized expression, he decided not to disturb her. For once, he wanted her to simply enjoy the world, the real one, beyond the palace walls. Suddenly, Miesa pointed out the window. "What is that?" she asked curiously, her eyes fixed on a group of wooden carts lined along the busy street. Eric followed her gaze. "Those are display carts," he explained. "Merchants use them to sell their goods, but what they sell is usually of poor quality." Miesa tilted her head, her brows furrowing. "If even the House of Cladine thinks it's of no quality," she said seriously, "then can it be of use at all?" Eric blinked, momentarily at a loss for words. Then realization dawned. She had misunderstood entirely, so that's what she thought. He recalled how she often sat on his lap while he reviewed financial reports. She must have seen his documents and somehow concluded that his family was struggling. Suppressing a laugh, he leaned closer. "Miesa," he began gently, "the shortage you saw was only temporary. It happened because the war ended and 17,000 soldiers returned home. That caused a strain on our food supply, but the issue has already been resolved." Her eyes widened slightly, listening intently as he continued, almost without noticing that he had started bragging. "The Cladine lands are prosperous," he said proudly. "We own 3 iron mines and several trade routes across the southern border. There's nothing for you to worry about." Only after finishing did he realize how self-satisfied he must have sounded. Clearing his throat awkwardly, he asked, Are you displeased? Misa shook her head. No, she said softly. I was just thinking. I used to leave my snacks unfinished, thinking there wasn't much food left. Now I wish I had eaten them all. Eric froze for a moment. So that's what she worried about, and he had no idea. As the carriage rolled past a confectionery, he suddenly tapped the wall for the driver to stop. Stay here, he said, opening the door. Don't unlock it until I return. Without waiting for her reply, he stepped out. Inside, Misa sat quietly. A faint sense of embarrassment crept up her face as she thought about her misunderstanding. She had once lived in the Celia Palace, small, isolated, yet the only home she had known, before being dragged to the royal palace against her will. There she had worn her title like armor, proud of being royal, because it was all she had left. But only after leaving that palace did she realize what peace felt like. She had never imagined that marriage, the one she had thought would end in misery, would bring her any measure of calm. As she gazed out the window, a group of women caught her attention. They were whispering among themselves, their fans half covering their mouths as they giggled. Look, it's Lord Cladeny, one murmured. The hero of the Western Front. Such a handsome man. Yes, another sighed. It's a pity he's trapped in that marriage. With the mad princess. The words struck Misa like a slap. Through the glass she saw Eric exiting the shop, a box of sweets in hand. Every woman's gaze followed him, some admiring, others pitying. She recognized those looks. They were the same looks she'd seen before. From Amberic, from the servants, from everyone in the house who pitied Eric for being tied to her. As Eric approached, the murmurs died down. He climbed into the carriage, as if nothing had happened, his expression composed. I apologize for keeping you waiting, he said simply, settling the box on his lap. Misa looked down, her hands clutching her gown tightly. For the first time, she realized that the marriage that brought her peace had only brought him pity. People saw him as a victim, and she was the reason why. And then another thought crept in, a cruel, lonely one. If everyone feels sorry for him, then who will ever feel sorry for me? I bought the most popular sweets in the South, Eric said cheerfully, opening the lid. The shopkeeper said they're his finest. Maybe Hallett tarts? Misa turned her face away. No, she said abruptly, don't open it. I don't like sweets. Her voice came out sharper than intended. She didn't even know why she was upset. At herself, at those whispers, or at the kindness that made her feel even smaller. Eric blinked, pausing mid-motion. What happened while I was gone? He asked calmly. Misa turned away, her tone cold. I told you I don't like sweets. Eric sighed softly, then reached out, gently taking her chin to turn her face toward him. Misa, he said quietly. I don't care if you like sweets or not. What concerns me is your mood. Something changed while I was away. We haven't been married long, but I can tell when something's wrong. His voice wasn't demanding. It was calm, almost patient. Misa stared at him in silence, surprised. He should have ignored her, dismissed her. But instead, he was trying to understand her. And somehow, that only made her chest ache even more. She ended up falling into his lap. Eric didn't say anything. He simply held her there, silent and still. But as time passed, Misa grew more and more embarrassed. Why did I do that? The question lingered in her mind, tightening in her chest. Even if they now held each other's lives in their hands, the man clearly had the advantage. He knew her secret, and she needed his cooperation to survive. And yet she had acted like a child. Maybe I've gotten too used to being treated like a human, she thought bitterly. So much that it's starting to affect me. Still, she reminded herself, no matter what, she needed to stay on good terms with him. When they arrived at the meeting point, Jella rejoined them. But as she climbed into the carriage, the air felt strangely heavy. She glanced between the two and felt a chill. Neither spoke a word. As they neared the palace, Eric noticed another carriage leaving the gates. His father's. From the direction, he could tell exactly where the man was headed, again, to visit his mistress. Edel's words from earlier echoed in his mind. You've neglected your duty. Maybe she wasn't entirely wrong. He had ignored his father's affair for far too long. And one man's corruption could tarnish the entire house if left unchecked. Young master, Jella called out as the carriage stopped. There's a box inside. Would you like me to bring it in? Eric turned to her, grabbing Misa in his arms. No, you can keep it, he said, his tone distant. Then he paused. Also, Gela, you're familiar with daggers, aren't you? Gela blinked, startled by the question. For a moment she thought of denying it, but lying to Eric never seemed wise. She nodded hesitantly. Good, he replied simply, then turned away, carrying Misa toward the mansion. Gela stood there, completely puzzled. She shrugged after a moment, picked up the box of sweets from the carriage, and left. From the balcony above, Misa's maids watched the entire scene unfold. He's spending so much time with his lover, one whispered. Strange taste for a man of his rank, another replied coldly. But as long as she keeps him satisfied, what does it matter? Inside the bedroom, Eric laid Misa carefully on the bed. Sitting beside her, he waited for her to say something, but she remained silent, her eyes turned away. Finally, he sighed and reached out, patting her head gently. Sleep well. I'll let you know when dinner is ready. he said softly, beginning to stand. But before he could leave, she grabbed his hand. Eric, are you angry with me? He looked back at her, puzzled. Misa knew the man likes it when she talks about herself, so she hesitated, then spoke in a low voice, choosing her words carefully. The sweet you bought, it's from Halieti. That's my mother's homeland. I don't like it. Eric froze. He hadn't known that. I see, he said quietly. The third and last queen of the former king, Misa's mother, had come from an insignificant noble family. When the king died, she gave birth to her first child, Misa, and was cast aside, banished to the small Celia palace, forgotten. Later, when Barmel ascended the throne, he destroyed her mother's family completely. From then on, the queen's name vanished from records, and few even remembered she had existed. I'm sorry, Eric said finally. Do you hate everything from there? Yes, Misa replied softly, her voice calm but firm. He sighed. That's why I keep asking about you, he explained gently. If I know you better, I won't make mistakes like today. She still held on to his hand. I understand, she murmured. He studied her face, then asked quietly. But there's something else, isn't there? Something that made you upset. Earlier. Misa turned her head away. I already told you, she said quickly. That's all. Eric frowned slightly. Misa! But before he could finish, she shut her eyes and pretended to sleep. He sighed, recognizing the act instantly. You're pretending again, he muttered under his breath. Reaching down, he pinched her nose gently, but she didn't react. Sitting there, he exhaled deeply. He hadn't expected her to open up overnight. But still, it weighed on his heart. Her way of avoiding confrontation. The way she buried her pain as if it didn't exist. It frightened him. He had seen soldiers lose their minds on the battlefield after tragedy. Men who smiled one day and broke down the next. Lately, Misa had been so calm and nonchalant that Eric almost forgot how tragic her past truly was, and he feared that one day, all that buried pain might erupt into an irreversible tragedy. A few days had passed since that incident. That night, Eric gently pulled the covers over Misa, tucking her in as she casually told him what she liked at dinner. I liked the soup today, she said softly. And the bread, it wasn't too hard. Eric nodded, smiling faintly. I'll let the kitchen know. But when he looked down, he froze. Misa was staring at him intently, her eyes wide, waiting. With a sigh of amusement, he leaned in and gave her a small peck on the forehead. As he pulled away, she spoke again, and today the sun was too strong, so I couldn't play outside. But I like it when the weather's good, and I can play outside. Eric chuckled under his breath and leaned in once more. I see, he said, pressing another gentle kiss to her cheek. Yet, even as he did, a strange heaviness settled in his chest, a feeling he couldn't quite name. Is that all? Misa asked, watching him expectantly, as though waiting for something more. That depends, Eric replied, meeting her gaze. Is there anything else you can tell me? What you said, that's something you could say to a stranger too. Misa frowned, clearly irritated by his demand. Eric quickly looked away, avoiding her gaze. The emotions stirring in him, affection, guilt, longing, felt unfamiliar and uncontrollable, and he found himself retreating without meaning to. After a moment, Misa turned to him quietly. I don't know what I can say to strangers or what to say to people close to me, she admitted. I never really had anyone to talk to. Until now. Eric exhaled heavily, covering his face with one hand. I see, he murmured, ashamed of his earlier coldness. There she was, trembling slightly beside him, filled with so much quiet anxiety, and all he could do was lay there, holding himself back, forcing his own emotions into silence. Feeling remorseful, he turned to her again. Then perhaps we can talk about that day, he said gently. There was something else, wasn't there? When she stayed silent, he added softly, I know it's hard to share, and you try to hide it from everyone, but it's a good sign, Misa, that you can't hide it from me. Misa looked at him for a long time before whispering, Why are you good to me? Her tone was quiet, but her confusion was clear. I don't understand why you're being so nice to me. Eric was taken aback by the question. After a moment, he turned his gaze away. Because you're a member of Cladine now, he said. We're family. Misa's eyes widened slightly. Family. The word sounded foreign to her, distant, something she had long forgotten the meaning of. And because we're family, Eric continued softly, you can be yourself with me. You can talk to me about anything. Just promise me two things. Stay faithful to me and remember that we'll always be on the same side. Of course, Misa said quickly, nodding without hesitation. But Eric could tell. They were thinking of different things. To her, it meant protecting each other's lives. To him, it meant something deeper. Trust, loyalty, a bond he hoped would someday become real. Well, he murmured, smiling faintly, we probably meant different things, but let's hope our intentions align someday. He pulled her gently into his arms and pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. Within moments, Misa's breathing slowed as she drifted off to sleep. It had been a long time since he had held her like this. and as she lay in his embrace, she could feel it, even without words, that the man beside her was trying his best to tell her something she couldn't yet understand. She had once thought Eric was only kind on the outside, but now she began to realize he was kind on the inside too. The next morning, Eric once again carried Misa gently in his arms as they prepared to leave for another outing. "I hope you have a good time again today, Misa," Lady Cladonay said warmly, her tone carrying the tenderness of a mother. Behind her, Adel stood silently, her expression unreadable. As the carriage began to roll forward, Adel finally spoke. Her voice was polite, but the irritation beneath it was unmistakable. "My lady, are you certain this is wise?" she asked carefully. The young master is still a man, after all, allowing such a young woman to spend this much time alone with him. Lady Cladonay turned slightly, cutting her off with a light scoff. "Oh, Adel," she said, shaking her head with a faint smile. "Didn't you see how they interact? There's nothing improper between them, and besides, how could Eric possibly be distracted by another woman when he's married to someone like Misa?" Her words carried a tone of confidence, almost pride. "Misa looks so lovely these days," she added softly, "though she still needs to gain a bit more weight. I'll have the butler prepare something special for her, something she likes." With that, Lady Cladonay turned and walked back into the palace. Edel stood there. The polite mask on her face slowly fell away, replaced by a look of dark irritation. She still couldn't understand it. Why was everyone so utterly captivated by that girl? What spell has she cast on them all? Late that night, Eric sat alone in his study. A report lay open on his desk. Today, Lady Malika, Misa's lady-in-waiting, had visited a pawnshop. That could only mean one thing: she was making her move. There was still no word from the House of Crispin. Leaning back in his chair, lost in thought, Eric suddenly noticed a faint movement at the doorway. Misa stood there quietly, her pale face half lit by the lantern's glow. "Misa," he said, surprised, "can't you sleep?" He gestured casually toward his lap. "Would you like to sit here like you used to?" Misa shook her head. "No, I came to tell you something." Her tone was serious, unusually so. "I thought about it a lot," she continued, "and I decided I don't dislike you anymore." Eric froze, staring at her blankly. "You disliked me?" he asked, almost bewildered. "But not anymore," Misa replied simply. Eric stood from his chair, walking slowly toward her. "So you just decided that you don't dislike me?" he asked, studying her expression. Misa flinched slightly at his tone. "Are you angry?" "No, Misa," he said softly, brushing her cheek with his fingers to reassure her. "But may I ask, why did you dislike me in the first place? Was it because I touched you? Did that make you uncomfortable?" "No," Misa replied immediately. Eric let out a quiet sigh of relief. "I don't feel uncomfortable," she added after a pause. "It's just unnecessary." Eric chuckled faintly. "I see. Well, I'm glad I don't make you uncomfortable anymore." "But Eric," Misa said suddenly, glancing around the study, "what are you doing?" "Just reviewing some documents," he replied, watching as she tilted her head curiously and stepped closer. "May I see them?" she asked. "Sure," Eric said, moving aside. "Just don't tear them up." "I don't need to tear them now," Misa said matter-of-factly, leaning over to read. To his surprise, she read quickly, her eyes moving with ease over the text. She must have spent more time reading than speaking all these years, Eric thought. "You hired someone to tail my lady-in-waiting?" she asked without looking up. "Yes, I did," he replied. "What about the House of Salakizi?" she continued, flipping a page. "Didn't they only exist in name?" "Yes," Eric said, leaning back in his chair. "But there's talk of an illegitimate heir. If it's true, he might revive the family line." Misa took her time finishing the report, then looked up at him. "I've read everything. Do you still have work to do?" "Yes," Eric said, glancing at the remaining papers. "I believe so." "Then," Misa paused, her voice soft but certain, "I want to sit on your lap." Eric blinked, caught off guard. "You may," he said after a moment. Without hesitation, Misa climbed onto his lap, sitting neatly, as she always did. "By the way, Eric," she said suddenly, tilting her head, "do people only kill when they're in bed?" Eric froze. "What?" "Now that I think about it," she continued innocently, "it's not just that I stopped disliking you, I think I like you now. So can we start to—" Before she could finish, Eric placed a finger under her chin, tilting her face upward. His tone turned low, suspicious. "What is it this time, Misa?" he asked. "Because, to be frank, your performance isn't very convincing." He leaned closer, sliding an arm behind her head, forcing her gently to recline against him. "So tell me the truth," he murmured. "What made you act this way tonight?" "But I came to tell you something important," Misa protested, "and I just wanted my reward, like always." Eric frowned. Her reasoning was strange, but not entirely wrong. "Well," he said slowly, a faint smile tugging at his lips, "I suppose you did tell me something important." He shifted his hand behind her neck, then leaned forward and pressed his lips against hers. Misa's eyes widened in surprise, her body stiffening for a moment at his sudden change in mood, but as his hand cradled her head, his lips deepening the kiss, she slowly relaxed, her arms wrapping around his neck, pulling herself closer until she was leaning over him, returning his kiss with the same quiet intensity. As their lips parted, both of them breathing heavily, Eric spoke first. "So, is that your only reason?" he asked quietly. Misa lowered her gaze. "We need to do it to save your life," she murmured. "Have you forgotten? If we keep putting this off, the king will—" Before she could finish, Eric caught her hand. "That won't happen," he said firmly. "The king already used that excuse once. If he does it again, he'll have to admit that his previous judgment was wrong." Misa blinked, trying to process his words. If that was true, then he had been calm all along, while she had been the only one growing desperate. But even so, if not this reason, there were countless others the king could use to destroy him. If something happened to him, she would lose everything, the only man in family who treated her as human. And if that happened, she had to make this marriage unshakable before it was too late. Her fingers fumbled clumsily at the knot of his robe, trembling from urgency more than courage. Eric sighed softly. "My lady, can you tell me why you're doing this?" Something inside her snapped. The man kept finding ways to step back, always reasoning, always avoiding. "Do I need a reason?" she asked, her tone rising in frustration. "Why won't you just say it? That you don't like my body?" Her voice broke, angry and trembling. "If it disgusts you, then close your eyes and get it over with." Eric looked at her in disbelief. "What on earth are you talking about? Do you really think I wouldn't like it?" Before she could respond, he tugged at the front ribbon she had been struggling with, loosening it with ease. By the time they reached the bedroom, Misa's thoughts were tangled with the cruel words of her ladies-in-waiting. How they mocked her scars, how they claimed no man would ever want to see her. But Eric didn't stop. He leaned over her, undoing the tie of his robe, the same one she had fumbled with earlier. The fabric slipped from his shoulders, revealing his body marked with old wounds. "As you can see," he said quietly, hovering above her, "I have plenty of scars myself." Misa stared at him, then slowly reached out, her fingers brushing one of the marks. "Who did this to you?" she asked softly. Eric smiled faintly, explaining where each scar came from, one by one, like old stories told by a soldier long returned from war. Up close, he seemed different. Broader, stronger, yet gentler than she'd expected. "So," he murmured, "do you dislike my body?" Misa quickly turned her face aside. "No, I like it," she said in a small voice. "Liar," Eric teased. "You just rolled your eyes." He leaned down, his breath brushing her neck. "Still, I forgive you." Misa trembled, her breath catching. A warmth spread through her chest, strange and unfamiliar, yet not unpleasant. Eric's voice grew softer. "You might feel some pain if we continue," he said, giving her a quiet warning. Startled, Misa turned her head toward him, but before she could speak, he pressed a kiss against her lips again, gentle but firm. When he finally pulled away, he rested his forehead on her shoulder with a quiet sigh. "I was going to stop here," he murmured, "since we're not ready yet, but—" He lifted his head, meeting her eyes. "Misa, I may do some things that surprise you," he said in a low voice. "But please, don't push me away, and don't say no, do you understand?" Misa looked up at him, hesitant, then slowly nodded. The man leaned down, his movements slow and deliberate. Only a moment later, Misa began to regret her answer. Yet in the end, he didn't go all the way that night either. A strange, unfamiliar ache lingered within her, a feeling she couldn't name or understand. The next day, Eric received a report from his men. According to them, when they tailed Lady Malika, she had visited a pawn shop. As she left, she quickly shoved something into her pocket, but it was so small that they couldn't make out what it was. One of his men followed her back to the palace, while another stayed behind at the shop. Around sunset, a hired carriage stopped in front of the pawn shop. An old woman stepped out and went inside. Soon after, she was thrown out by the shopkeeper, shouting about a brooch she was trying to sell. When they followed her back home, they noted her address and brought it to Eric. Eric studied the paper, his brows furrowed. The address seemed familiar, but he couldn't quite remember why. "I see," he murmured, dismissing his men with a nod. When he returned to his room, Gela was there, reading a book aloud to Misa. Seeing him, Gela immediately stood up, her expression hesitant, as if debating whether to speak. After a moment, she finally asked, "My lord, are you planning to go outside again today? With the princess and me?" Eric raised an eyebrow, surprised by her sudden question. "Perhaps. Why do you ask?" Gela explained. "Earlier, one of the princess's maids asked me the same thing. I'm not entirely sure, but their behavior seems suspicious. I think they might be planning something." Eric's expression darkened slightly. "I see." Her instincts matched his own unease. If they were planning something, he'd rather face it head-on. He opened his wardrobe and took out a dagger belt, handing it to Gela. "Cullen will show you how to wear this properly. After that, get off the carriage and move around as usual. Keep in mind, Cullen will be following you." Gela blinked, confused but determined. "Understood," she said slowly. "Then I'll prepare the carriage for our outing." She bowed lightly and left the room. Once she was gone, Eric turned to Misa and began helping her dress. He placed a lightweight protective vest under her gown. "There will be knights around, but this will give me peace of mind," he explained. Misa's cheeks flushed. For some reason, she couldn't meet his eyes. "Let me know if it feels uncomfortable," Eric said, adjusting the straps. "No, it's fine," she replied softly, then pointed toward a small ribbon bib her maids had made for her. "Could you help me tie this?" Eric paused, looking at it curiously. He hadn't known she liked such accessories. With a faint smile and a touch of embarrassment, he tied it gently around her neck. "I'm not sure I'm doing it right," he admitted, "but I'll try my best." When he finished, he brushed a hand over her shoulder and said quietly, "Let's just hope all these precautions turn out to be unnecessary." For a long time, nothing happened. Their carriage moved steadily through the streets, and their outing passed peacefully, just like before. Eric began to think perhaps the tension had been for nothing. But when they returned to the meeting point after 3 hours, Gela appeared, disheveled, bruised, and clearly hurt. She climbed into the carriage, breathing heavily. "I'm assuming," she said dryly, "that I'll be getting paid extra for this." Eric stared at Gela's disheveled appearance, his brows knitting with concern. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his tone firm yet worried. "Yes, I am," Gela replied with a sigh, brushing the dirt from her sleeve. "But my feelings are hurt the most, and all because of Sir Cullen." Her expression darkened as she said his name. Eric frowned slightly. "What happened?" Gela exhaled, clearly irritated, and began to explain. "After I left, I wandered around the market like usual, picked up some herbs, stopped by a bookstore. Then, out of nowhere, some man bumped into me. I was about to yell at him, but before I could, he just ran off without even apologizing. A moment later, I realized he'd robbed me." Eric listened quietly, his gaze steady. "So, naturally, I ran after him," Gela continued, gesturing animatedly. "But the bastard led me into a dark alley. That's when I realized he wasn't working alone. A whole group was waiting there." Her voice grew tense. "Disgusting men. And what annoys me more is that I fell for something so obvious." She paused, scowling. "At first, I stayed still and listened. They were talking among themselves. And that's when I found out their real plan wasn't just to rob me. They wanted to kidnap me." Eric's eyes narrowed. "They attacked me," Gela went on. "One came straight at me, but I knocked him flat on the ground. Then another tried to throw a sack over my head from behind. That was it. I lost my temper." She scratched her cheek, a little embarrassed. "Well, I could have gone along with their plan and found out who sent them, but I was too angry to think straight." Eric sighed quietly. "I see. But here's the strange part," Gela continued. "There were plenty of them. Yet they didn't all come at once. They came one by one. I couldn't figure out why. Until I looked around and saw who was behind it." She took a deep breath. "It was Sir Cullen, sending them at me, one after another, like it was some kind of twisted training session. And every time he sent someone in, he muttered a number under his breath. So I got little ahead of myself thinking he was ranking me." Eric rubbed his forehead. He was probably comparing your skill to his younger brothers at that age, he said, understanding the pattern immediately. "Yes," Gela burst out. "And he had the audacity to explain that to me afterward." She threw her hands up. "When I finally knocked them all down, he asked me, what's the point of having a dagger if I'm just going to use brute strength? So, you know what I did? I showed him the point of a dagger, by interrogating those men myself." Eric's lips pressed into a thin line. He was about to stop her, worried the story might be too much for Misa, but when he glanced at her, he froze. Misa was covering her mouth, her shoulders trembling, not in fear, but in suppressed laughter. Puzzled, Eric turned back to Gela. "Captain?" Gela said, noticing his mind wandering. "Yes, go on," Eric replied, clearing his throat. Gela shrugged her hand. "Anyway, after a little persuasion, they confessed. They were hired through a thieves' guild. The instructions were specific." Her voice grew heavy. "They were to kidnap me, keep me captive for months, and then send me back to the Cladonea estate, pregnant." Eric's jaw tightened. He didn't need to hear more to guess who was behind it. Gela crossed her arms again, trying to regain her composure. "So, I hope I'm getting paid extra for this," she muttered. Eric finally exhaled. "I heard you were saving to buy a blacksmith shop in your hometown," he said calmly. "I'll purchase it with my own assets. It may take a few weeks, but by next month, the title deed will be in your hands." Gela's eyes widened. "Seriously?" she said, stunned. Eric nodded once. "Thank you," she said quickly, then looked down at her torn clothes and messy hair. "Well, since I'm in this state, I'll return with Sir Cullen." She gave a short bow and stepped out of the carriage, leaving Eric and Misa behind in the quiet that followed. Eric's expression darkened, his jaw tightening. "They're playing dirty," he muttered under his breath. "They wanted to spread rumors about me and Gela." Misa lifted her head, her tone calm as ever. "Now that I remember, they once said Gela was your lover." Eric let out a slow sigh. "I expected as much," he said, shaking his head. Then, softening his tone, he turned toward her. "Anyway, are you all right, my lady?" he asked gently. Misa blinked at him. "About what?" "About what Gela said earlier," he clarified, a hint of confusion in his eyes. "I thought it might have disturbed you." "Oh, that?" she said with a faint shrug. "I guess I really was scared when I was young. But now?" I'm used to seeing blood. Eric's brows furrowed slightly. You've seen it that often? He asked quietly, his tone unreadable. Actually, Misa began, looking away as if recalling something distant. I kind of had a habit of laughing like a mad person. Sometimes I even had to sleep beside dead bodies. When I was young, I didn't have much choice. I had to prove I was truly mad. Eric said nothing, his gaze fixed on her. She continued in her usual matter-of-fact tone. But about 2 years ago, the ladies-in-waiting started, suspecting that I was gaining my senses back. By then, everyone close to me was already dead, so I couldn't sleep with dead bodies as often as before. Her voice lowered slightly. After that, I came up with other crazy things, just to make sure they'd still believe I'd lost my mind. For a long moment, Eric simply stared at her. His chest felt heavy. He couldn't begin to imagine the kind of horror she'd endured since childhood. The loneliness, the fear she had disguised behind that false madness. There are still things you dislike and fear to this day, aren't there? He asked softly. Misa's eyes flickered toward him. I don't want to remember my childhood, she said quietly. And I don't want to talk about it. She leaned forward suddenly, her fingers brushing his cheek. May I ask why you're asking me that? Eric didn't flinch. Because I'd like to understand you better, he replied calmly. Misa tilted her head, her expression unreadable. That depends, she said slowly. This is a very big secret, one that requires an equally big reward in return. Thinking back to her childhood, Misa realized those were the happiest days of her life. Misa, I told you, no more candies, her mother scolded gently. Little Misa turned around, pouting, clutching a handful of sweets she wasn't supposed to have. The nearby maids laughed softly, one of them scooping her up in her arms to shield her from her mother's pretend anger. Her days in the small Celia Palace were peaceful and warm. It wasn't a luxurious life, but everyone there smiled at her with affection. Don't hide, Misa, her mother said. Didn't I tell you what happens to bad girls who don't listen to their mothers on rainy days, her mother said playfully, grabbing her. The goddess comes down to take them away. Her mother's laughter filled the garden. Those moments, her laughter, the scent of sweet herbs, were the only memories of warmth that stayed with Misa forever. But then came the day when everything changed. A royal informant arrived, whispering something into her mother's ear. After that, her mother's smile faded. She looked worried the whole day. One day when the storm came, with thunder shaking the walls of Celia Palace, Misa remembered her mother's warning about the goddess coming down on rainy days. That was the day King Barmal barged into the palace. Her mother's voice trembled as she hurriedly pushed Misa under the bed. I'm afraid, Misa. Mommy has done something very bad. Even mothers must be punished if they do wrong. Do you understand? But let's hide together, Mother. I don't want you to be punished, little Misa cried, clutching her mother's dress. Her mother's eyes softened. There's nothing we can do, Misa. I'm sorry. And just like that, one by one, everyone in Celia Palace died. Before her end, her mother had whispered one last command. Hide here and pretend you've gone mad from seeing blood. Those were her final words, the key to Misa's survival. Perhaps her mother believed King Barmal's reign wouldn't last, that help would come soon. But no one came. 8-year-old Misa lived confined within the palace, surviving only by obeying her mother's final words. She had truly believed the goddess had come to punish her for not listening to her mother. Her life turned into nothing but pain. Following her mother's advice, she did whatever it took to stay alive. She hid among corpses. The first months, sleeping in that hall filled with dead bodies, were unbearable. But she endured. She forced herself to laugh like a madwoman, to speak nonsense, to stop feeling. Eventually, King Barmal believed it. He was convinced she had gone insane. At first, she would still think of her mother and cry quietly in the dark. But after a while, she realized the tears no longer came. Her heart had gone numb. Now, lying under Eric, Misa told him everything. Every word, every scar of her past. And in return, he gave her the reward she'd wanted most. Misa, Eric murmured softly, his voice strained as he hovered above her. Your mother? She said she named you herself? Yes, Misa replied, her voice trembling. She said she had to beg for permission to name me. Does your name have a special meaning? He asked, his voice low and husky, still heavy with the lingering warmth of their union. Her lips parted as she whispered. Mother said, if someone says my name, their mouth must form a smile. That's why she chose Misa, so that I could bring happiness to everyone around me. Eric's breath hitched. Misa, he whispered again, holding her tightly, his voice breaking. Misa, he pressed her against his chest, his lips tracing soft kisses along her cheek, down her neck, repeating her name like a prayer, like a vow. And for the first time in years, as his voice trembled around her name, Misa's own eyes filled with tears. She finally understood. He wasn't just saying her name. He was proving to her that she had indeed brought happiness into someone's life. As Eric held her close, the tears that had long been frozen finally slipped down the corners of her eyes. At dawn, Eric was the first to wake. He gazed quietly at Misa, sleeping peacefully in his arms. The sight filled his heart with a calm joy. There were still so many questions he wanted to ask her, but he decided to save them for later. He didn't want to reopen her wounds by reminding her of the past. Leaning closer, he pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. Just then, a sharp knock echoed at the door. "My lord, an urgent letter has arrived," the butler's voice called from outside, hurried and tense. "I urge you to read it immediately." After dressing up, Eric stepped out of his chamber. He walked along the corridor with his men trailing behind. One of them stepped forward, bowing slightly before reporting, "As per your instructions, my lord, we investigated the old woman who visited the pawn shop. Our findings confirmed that she is the mother of the vice commander of the Crispin Knights." Eric narrowed his eyes slightly. "The vice commander? I've heard of him," he murmured. The soldier continued, "Yes, my lord. He's known for his skill, but because of his commoner blood and his brutality, he was never promoted to commander. Furthermore, the family has been involved in questionable activities for years, dirty work done on behalf of the House of Crispin. His father was once executed on charges of assaulting a noblewoman, but witnesses claim he only took the blame for the head of the Crispin house, who was the true culprit." Eric's gaze hardened. "So the same bloodline continues its loyalty through corruption. We also discovered that the old woman maintains connections with a certain thieves' guild. The men who attacked Lady Gela were members of that very guild. It's led by her own younger brother," the soldier added grimly. Eric's steps slowed as the pieces came together. "So the House of Crispin is behind it all," he said, his voice low and controlled. But still, the logic didn't settle right with him. "Even so, why go to such lengths? To taint my father's name with rumors of a mistress? To try and dishonor my household by targeting Gela? Are they simply after the position of the next Lady of Cladinay? Or do they mean to destroy our house entirely?" He stopped in the middle of the hall, his tone firm. "Cullen," he called out. "Yes, my lord." "Bring me all records of the House of Crispin's past activities, their trades, alliances, and connections. Everything," Eric ordered. As Eric resumed walking, his thoughts tightened into unease. The Crispin family scheme had been sloppy, too easily uncovered, their network collapsing in mere days. But the mystery surrounding his father's secret lover, despite his best efforts, remained completely hidden. The contrast unsettled him. Their methods, their timing, it all felt too mismatched. Was the House of Crispin truly the mastermind, or merely a pawn? Just then, one of the attendants hurried toward him. "Young master, Mistress Cladinay is awake now," he reported. Eric paused. "I see," he said softly. "I'll go to her now." As he turned down the corridor toward Misa's chambers, one thought echoed in his mind with chilling clarity. If the Crispins were not the true hand behind all this, then there was only one other person with enough power to manipulate them all: the king. Inside the bedroom, Misa's ladies-in-waiting stood around her as usual, observing her closely, analyzing every small detail of her appearance. From their looks, it was clear they had already deduced what had taken place the previous night. Misa, laying quietly on the edge of the bed, felt uncomfortable under their scrutiny. Yet, at the same time, she thought perhaps it was a good thing. If they go and report this to the king, maybe he'll finally stop interfering, she reasoned to herself. "It's perfect timing," Lady Melika said suddenly, clapping her hands lightly. "Let's begin our plan. I'll bring out the things." She walked over to a cabinet and began rummaging through it. "The door is locked, right?" asked one of the other maids, glancing anxiously toward the entrance. "Yes, it's locked," Malika replied curtly. "Now hold her up and let's finish our work before anyone interrupts." Misa's eyes followed their every move, confusion creeping into her chest. Her messy hair brushed across her face as she watched Malika pull out a new dress and several items from the chest. She turned toward her with a bright, practiced smile. "You finally managed to capture your husband's attention, didn't you? So now, let's make sure you don't lose it so easily." Her tone sent an uneasy chill through Misa. She didn't understand what they were really intending, but the way Malika's eyes glinted as she approached made her tense. Meanwhile, outside the door, Jella approached in her one good arm. "Good morning," she greeted Valak, Cullen's younger brother, who was standing guard by the entrance. "You're late today," Valak remarked, glancing at her bandaged arm. "Well," Jella said dryly, raising her brow. "It's not easy moving fast with a broken arm." He nodded. "Fair enough. Anyway, go on in. Those two ladies went inside a while ago." "Those two?" Jella frowned slightly but nodded. "Got it." She pushed open the door slowly. The room was empty. Her eyes darted across the chamber. No sign of Misa anywhere. The bed was still unmade. A faint sound of something shuffling came from behind the closed bathroom door. "Mistress Cladinay?" Jella called out quietly, but no one answered. Then she froze. From behind that door came the distinct sound of muffled voices. Jella's posture stiffened immediately, every sense on alert. Something wasn't right. Inside the bathroom, chaos filled the air. Everything lay scattered across the tiled floor, cosmetic boxes overturned, broken brushes rolling underfoot. Lady Malika stood near the sink, a red lipstick case clutched tightly in her hand. Her tone was sharp and commanding. "I told you to hold her properly," she snapped. Below her, Misa, now dressed in a new gown, struggled and breathed heavily as the other maid pinned her down by the hair. Misa's body trembled. Something felt terribly wrong this time. Usually, her defiance would have earned her a slap or a scolding. But today, they were calm. Too calm. As if they had a clear, deliberate purpose. Malika crouched down, twisting the lipstick open. Now then. Let's make you more, presentable, she said coldly. She dipped the small brush into the red pigment and reached toward Misa's lips. In a sudden motion, Misa jerked her head, and the brush flew from Malika's hand, clattering against the floor. For a brief moment, she thought she had won, but the woman only smirked. I guess I have no choice, Malika muttered. My fingers will do just fine. She dabbed her finger into the lipstick and reached forward again. A deep, instinctive fear struck Misa. Her heart pounded violently. Something about this felt more dangerous than any punishment she'd ever faced. If I don't stop them now, I might die here. Just then, a familiar voice called from outside the door, firm and clear. Mistress Cladine, are you in there? It was Jella. The door rattled once, followed by her voice again. Why is this locked? Misa's eyes widened. This was her chance. Gathering every ounce of strength, she screamed as loudly as she could. The sound echoed sharply through the room, before a rough hand clamped down over her mouth. But it was too late. Outside, Gela froze for a second. Then she began pounding on the door with her fist. Mistress Cladine, are you all right? She shouted, hitting it again and again. Her injured arm throbbed painfully, but she didn't stop. Inside, panic flickered across the younger maid's face. Lady Malika, what do we do? What if they break in? Move your hand, Malika said darkly. But I said move your hand, she barked. We'll finish this before they come in. The frightened maid hesitated. What if she screams again? Let her, Malika hissed. We'll tell them she was hysterical, and we had to lock her in for her own safety. Meanwhile, outside, Valak had joined Gela, throwing his shoulder against the door again and again. It's solid oak, he grunted. It's not giving way. Inside, Malika glared down at Misa. It won't open easily, she sneered, so stop wasting our time. She brought her stained fingers closer to Misa's lips. Before she could touch her, Misa spit, straight at her face. You little brat, Malika's voice shook with rage. You looked me in the eyes just now, didn't you? Misa froze. No, you're not acting like a mad woman at all, Malika said, her tone low and venomous. She tilted her head, eyes narrowing as realization dawned. So that's it. You've been pretending all along. Misa's blood ran cold. She quickly lowered her gaze, but it was too late. Her trembling hands gave her away. Well, well, Malika said, wiping her cheek slowly. What do we have here? Outside, Gela and Valak were still struggling with the door when a sharp, commanding voice cut through the hall. What's going on here? They turned to see Eric approaching, his eyes like steel. Gela immediately stepped forward, breathless. Captain, something's wrong, she screamed. And the door's locked! He didn't waste a second. Step aside, he ordered. Valak and Gela moved instantly. Eric strode forward, drew back his leg, and slammed his boot into the door. Once, twice, 3 times. With a thunderous crack, the lock splintered and the door burst open. The scene inside made his blood run cold. Misa sat on the floor, her hair tangled, her gown half pulled, her frightened eyes darting down, while Malika stood frozen with the red-stained lipstick still in her hand. Eric's face darkened, his voice like ice. Tie them up. Lady Malika, startled by Eric's sudden entrance, stumbled back. Young master, it's not what it looks like. You must understand, she began hastily. But before she could finish, Gela lunged forward, fury blazing in her eyes. She grabbed Malika by the hair and yanked her back hard. How dare you lay a hand on Mistress Cladine, she shouted, her voice echoing through the marble walls. Malika shrieked in pain, trying to pull away, but Gela's grip only tightened. Eric's sharp gaze swept over the room, taking in every detail. The overturned chair, the lipstick-stained floor, the terror in Misa's trembling frame. He turned immediately toward her. Misa? He called softly, striding forward, his tone shifting from command to concern. Are you hurt? Miesa, still sitting on the cold floor, looked up at him through her ruffled hair. For a moment, everything blurred, the noise, the shouting, even her own fear. All she could see was the man walking toward her, steady and protective. When he knelt beside her, the world seemed to still. Eric reached out gently, brushing aside the strands of hair sticking to her face. It's all right, he murmured, his voice low but firm. It's over now. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly against his chest. The familiar warmth and scent of him, steady and grounding, wrapped around her like a shield. Her body trembled, but slowly her grip on his coat tightened, clutching him as if afraid he might disappear. It's okay, he whispered again, his hand cradling the back of her head. No one will touch you now. Without looking back, Eric rose to his feet, still carrying her in his arms. He turned toward the doorway, his face dark with restrained fury. Behind him, Lady Malika struggled free from Gela's hold, shouting, Young master, please, you must listen to me. I have something important to tell you. That woman, she's deceiving you. She's only pretending to be... Eric stopped mid-step. The words froze the air. His grip on Misa instinctively tightened as he turned slightly, his expression unreadable. Malika's trembling voice continued, desperate. She's not what you think she is! In that instant, Eric's heart sank. His mind went cold. She knows the truth. And that's a wrap. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and share your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this and want to be part of our growing community, hit join to support the channel. Take care and see you soon.